Gerard was stunned for a few seconds by Severus's words, then quickly realized what he might be apologizing for. Her eyes brightened, and the worried set of her mouth loosened into something like excitement. "Oh, it's nothing. Really, Mr. Snape, everyone makes mistakes. We can correct them. What is it you want to say? Have you found new evidence that overturns your earlier conclusions?" Her change of expression was obvious to both Nicholas and Severus. Severus did not answer immediately. He exchanged a look with Nicholas. They had discussed what to say, but Nicholas's face showed clear disappointment at Gerard's reaction. He was, after all, a French wizard with a deep sense of belonging to his country. Even though he had promised Grindelwald in Nurmengard to keep certain things secret, in his heart he still hoped the French ministry would emerge from that shadow of the past, face reality, and accept what had happened. From the way things seemed right now, however, it looked as if the only way the ministry would truly move on was for the old generation who remembered those days to die out. Severus noticed Nicholas's disappointment, but personally he had no complaints. The ministry's earlier impulse to bury its head in the sand had been a direct obstacle to the rescue and investigation. Their actions conflicted with Severus's goal of finding Nicholas. Now, the Lemay couple had been safely recovered, and the elder acolytes who had rallied around Grindelwald had seen him and lost their nerve. Most had simply gone home. There was no longer a conflict between Severus and a ministry that wished to ignore things. "It was done by Death Eaters," he said evenly. He spoke with the kind of gravity that suggested he had seen the Dark Lord himself issuing orders to send people to France to abduct Nicolas Flamel, raise an inferi throng, and set off skull-shaped fireworks. Joy sparked in Gerard's eyes. Her quick quotes quill began to scrawl across the parchment, recording Severus's testimony. Are you sure? You already caught Shafiq. Last night a huge skull-shaped display lit up over Paris, and there were inferi. From what I know, the Dark Lord has the intent and the preparations for large-scale inferi creation. Severus was not lying. He merely stated part of the facts. The reason I was able to rescue the Lemay couple was because I recognized another Death Eater among that group, a British pureblood named Flint. Following his trail, I found their hidden base in the Jura and located the Lemay couple. He recounted the discovery and the steps he had taken, laying out the evidence. Gerard grew more excited as he spoke. But when the head of the Auror headquarters glanced at Nicholas, who lay back on the sofa with his eyes half closed, looking slightly exhausted, she felt a fleeting, inexplicable mixture of shame and discomfort. She quickly crushed it and pressed Severus and Nicholas for more specifics. Severus told what he could. Nicholas, however, seemed uninterested in speaking. He looked tired and dozed lightly. 2 hours later, the questioning concluded. Whether Gerard truly believed them or preferred to keep her head buried in the sand, she politely reminded the Lemay couple to rest, then took the completed transcript to Minister Rousseau. Severus watched Nicholas reopen his eyes and stare blankly at the closed door after Gerard left. He hesitated, wondering whether to offer comfort. Nicholas spoke first. Politics, truly the most necessary and also the most foolish invention in human history. He sighed, shaking his head. Madame Lemay leaned over and whispered, "Haven't you prepared? We've had time. These matters need no longer concern us. We've done enough." It sounded like a private decision between them. Severus, familiar with the original sequence of events, could guess what they intended. Nicholas took his wife's hand and smiled. "You're right. Whatever happens, it no longer concerns us. It's enough to enjoy the days we have left." He rose from the sofa. The couple did not want to linger at the ministry any longer. Outside, a crush of newspaper reporters had already gathered, jostling to get at the Lemay couple for interviews. The couple hated that sort of attention and only wanted to go home. Severus said a brief farewell and agreed to bring Harry and the others to their house for lunch. After several attempts by Aurors to persuade them to stay, the Lemay couple finally left through the reception hall fireplace. The reporters who had been clamoring to get out realized they had missed the most valuable first-hand story. A few dashed off immediately for the Lemay couple's home to try to intercept Nicolas Flamel. The majority, however, swarmed Severus. Word had already spread that he had been the one to rescue the Lemay couple. A former dean of a British school who had recently made headlines at home. A British wizard outshining a team of French aurors in France and solving the kidnapping would be irresistible copy. The reporters pressed in like a tide, cameras aimed at him like long and short barrels. Severus fought his way toward the corridor and found Harry and the others similarly besieged. Their stand against intruders inside the Ministry of Magic had made good news, and the kids' ages and nationalities were especially intriguing. After failing to break free for a time, Severus returned to the reception hall and sank onto a single sofa. The reporters swarmed him anew. "Mr. Snape, we hear you disagreed with the aurors during the investigation. Was Nicholas Flamel rescued only because of your persistence, while the French aurors were corrupt and incompetent? Were you specially invited from Britain to take part in this case? The Auror Office announced a joint task force with British aurors. Did you facilitate that? How do you judge the French aurors' performance in this case? Are you disappointed in them? We heard you worked closely with British aurors a month ago. What differences do you see between our aurors and theirs? Mr. Snape?" None of them wanted the details of how Severus had rescued the LeMay couple. They wanted scandal. Every question was aimed to push him into the limelight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Severus said, "I have already given a statement to Auror Supervisor Gerard about the rescue. If you have questions on that, take them up with the Auror Office. As for your broader questions, there is not much difference between aurors here and aurors elsewhere, nor between ministries of magic. What you should be focused on is that the people who abducted the LeMay couple have not all been caught and are still at large. If you truly care what the public is worried about, you should be working to uncover information about the culprits." There was a stunned silence. Then someone pushed back, eager. "Are you saying your opinion of the French aurors isn't worth our attention? Do you think your true thoughts would hurt French feelings?" "Mr. Snape, when you say we should focus on the culprits, do you mean you have no confidence in the French aurors to continue pursuing them? Are you trying to mobilize the public?" Severus had already extended his wand. Those reporters who had been blocking his path were suddenly shoved aside by an unseen force, clearing a lane. He strode through the crowd, pulling Harry and the others with him, and made for the flue. There was no point lingering. They hadn't had time to see Paris properly, and before lunch at the LeMay residence, they decided to explore the wizarding streets. Harry seemed upbeat about the morning's chaos. Lupin deflected the reporter's more pointed questions with ease. Draco, however, sulked. It wasn't because he'd been ignored, quite the opposite. A Malfoy child rescuing a Muggle was sensational news, and many journalists asked whether his act meant his father was abandoning pure-blood supremacist traditions. Draco went on the defensive, insisting the Malfoys would continue to uphold pure-blood principles and that his aid to a Muggle had been an exceptional expression of a pure-blood's nobility. But a 9-year-old could not out-argue the slick reporters. The more he protested, the hungrier they became. If Lupin had not restrained him, he might have come to blows. That was why he now looked so dejected. He could already imagine how this would be spun back in Britain and feared his standing among the Goyle and Crabbe children would be ruined. Harry noticed. While they wandered through a narrow street of wand makers and apothecaries, he said, "Why do you care so much what those reporters say? You weren't like this when Madame Rosier thanked you and invited you to dinner." "What would you know?" Draco snapped. "Do you know how humiliating it would be if word got out that I protected a Muggle?" "Anyone who thinks that's embarrassing is the one who's abnormal," Harry said, folding his arms and adopting Severus's scolding tone. "You can't only look at the critics. Look at the people who will praise you. If this gets back to Britain, you'll get more praise than scorn." "No pure-blood family will praise me," Draco replied, face hard. Harry shrugged. "The Weasleys would. Mrs. Weasley would happily invite you in for pie." "Don't talk about those upstarts," Draco sneered. "They're blood traitors." Harry's eyebrows shot up. "You will not speak of my friends like that." "Your friends," Draco curled his lip, instinctively disdainful. "Birds of a feather." He had not been so openly spiteful in days, but it slipped out. Severus and Lupin both grabbed the boys by the back of their collars before the quarrel escalated. All right, Severus said. clearly seeing why Draco had snapped. "Watch your language, Draco. I have warned you about manners." Draco snorted and turned away. Harry, fists clenched, would have charged if Lupin had not held him. Severus seized on a distraction. "How about we visit a broom shop?" he suggested. "Let's look at the latest brooms. Even if you're not old enough to own one yet, you all like them, don't you?" "What? Snape is in Paris?" At the British Ministry of Magic, the first person to hear from the French was naturally Scrimgeour, head of the Auror office, who was in the middle of preparing the Anglo-French Joint Auror Task Force. He had not expected Severus, who had vanished from Britain only days earlier, to have gone abroad. Robards, who had delivered the correspondence, set the French newspapers and an official letter from the French Auror headquarters on Scrimgeour's desk. "The French have confirmed the kidnappers of Nicholas Flamel are Death Eaters," Robards said. "Last night there was an attack on a Muggle orphanage on the outskirts of Paris. Over a dozen Muggles, a witch, and 2 squibs are believed dead. When the French Aurors arrived, a tide of inferi rose up from underground, and then someone lit the signal." Scrimgeour's face tightened with shock and confusion. Did Barty Crouch Jr. really take his people to France to abduct Flamel? He grew restless, pacing in front of his desk. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. Kidnapping Nicolas Flamel in Paris and attacking an orphanage. There must be another purpose. What about the Philosopher's Stone? Did they say whether Flamel's stone was taken? Robards flipped through more letters, his expression a mix of hesitation and incredulity. "Sir, it wasn't just the orphanage. A group also broke into the French Ministry of Magic last night. 3 goblins were found using wands illegally, along with a number of unidentified dark wizards. They stole a classified file from the minister's office, attempted to seize a muggle, and finally—" "Finally what?" Scrimgeour snapped. Robards swallowed and handed Scrimgeour a photograph. "In the end, 2 children and Remus Lupin drove them off." Scrimgeour took the photo. He recognized Lupin immediately, but the 2 boys beside him made his eyes widen. "This is Snape's student. What's his name?" "Dudley Dursley. And the pale blonde boy? He looks familiar." "That's Draco Malfoy, Lucius Malfoy's only son," Robards said. He knew the pureblood families well. "The Malfoy child." Scrimgeour frowned. "Snape and Malfoy have a good relationship. It's not surprising, but what could 2 children do? They haven't even been to a magical school and shouldn't be eligible for wands. Did Lupin drive off those 3 goblins?" Robards did not answer directly. He handed over a thank you letter from Gerard, written personally, which detailed how the goblins had been driven off and praised how much effort the boy named Dudley had expended. Scrimgeour felt absurd. He couldn't help the sarcastic comment that burst out. The French ministry's out of people, then had to rely on 2 British children to protect their headquarters. Then he saw the propaganda potential. He handed the photograph back to Robards. "Summon the press and get this out immediately. Any 2 British children who haven't even studied at a magical school saved the French Ministry of Magic? The public will feast on that. The leaky cauldron won't be empty for a week." Robards hesitated. "Sir, there's more." He slid another letter across the desk. "It's not just the children. Severus Snape himself. He rescued the LeMay couple." Scrimgeour's narrowed eyes brightened. This was even better. That will distract from the Azkaban escapes. He had been suspicious of Snape, the former Slytherin dean, but that suspicion had been political instinct rather than personal malice. After learning Severus had helped the Aurors with the Crouch case, Scrimgeour had softened. Whether Snape had treated Aurors coolly mattered less than the public need. The ministry needed good news to counter the string of Death Eater breaks from Azkaban. Snape and Lupin arriving in Paris with the 2 boys sounded exactly like the kind of good news to lift spirits. Scrimgeour's plan snapped into place. Send notices to every wizarding paper. A press conference at the Auror headquarters at 2 this afternoon. Make dozens of copies of Gerard's thank you letters and give one to every reporter. Notify the Minister of Magic and the Wizengamot. Snape's role in rescuing Nicholas Flamel and the other incidents are enough to upgrade his Order of Merlin, 2nd class. The 2 children aren't eligible for medals yet. Give Lupin a 3rd class and nominate the children. Publish that too. Have Kingsley run the press conference. He handles reporters well. Make sure he emphasizes that the Death Eaters' operation in France suffered a major defeat, that they failed to kidnap Flamel, and that the British and French ministries will form a joint investigation team to pursue all cases involving fugitive Death Eaters. Robards left at once to carry out the instructions. Scrimgeour remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, pacing slowly now. Aurors might be blunt, but Scrimgeour was no fool. From the French reports and the fact that Severus had appeared in Paris unannounced, the rescue of Flamel looked too coincidental. Scrimgeour did not suspect Snape of colluding with Death Eaters. After his actions against Barty Crouch Jr., Severus had effectively broken with them, but he wondered whether Severus had access to special channels of information. Snape had once been close to the Death Eaters and maintained ties with pure-blood families like the Malfoys. Perhaps he possessed critical intelligence and chose to act alone. Scrimgeour worried, too, about Sirius Black's escape. Flamel had been kidnapped well before Black's breakout. The kidnappers could not have coordinated with Azkaban. Now that news of Snape and his party in Paris was spreading, if Black intended to target them, he would act. Scrimgeour's face grew stern. Snape's matter was not yet settled. Little Hangleton, England. 2 days after leaving the Gaunt Shack, Barty Crouch Jr. had taken his followers to a nearby house whose owner was the cemetery caretaker. They held the Muggle under Imperius, forcing him to remain at the cemetery during the day and only return home when the spell waned. Barty kept a low profile. Only Roll knew they had been to the Gaunt Shack, and only he knew exactly what Barty had taken from it. As Severus had guessed, the Malfoy-aligned former Death Eaters had not kept their promise to cut ties with Barty. They hedged their bets, giving assurances to Severus that they would fund his search for the Dark Lord, while also clandestinely informing Barty's people of goings-on inside the Ministry, passing along Auror plans, covering tracks when needed, and providing funds. Barty had expected no better. His master had not yet been found. These people had to be kept pacified. Even if they could not help now, they must not cause trouble. Once the Dark Lord returned, they would fall in line. During his retreat in Little Hangleton, Barty learned of Black's escape. He knew little of Sirius Black. He had spent too little time in Azkaban and had not been a Death Eater long enough to know all the underground currents. What he did know was that someone in the Potter Circle had betrayed them, that the traitor's tip-off had led the Dark Lord to the Potter's hiding place on that fateful night, and Potter's betrayer was believed to be Black. The Ministry had thrown Black in Azkaban and labeled him a true Death Eater traitor. Barty resolved to contact Black after his escape, but no signal, mark, or trace led to him. Black had vanished. With the Dark Lord gone, the Death Eaters had fractured into 5 factions, those still in Azkaban, Barty's Crouch faction, Severus's faction, Black as a lone wolf, and the fence-sitters like the Malfoys. The once unified force that had intimidated the Ministry was splintered, a fact that angered Barty, though it also steeled him. There was only one way to change it: bring back the Dark Lord. Whoever could restore him would command everyone else. Late that night, in the caretaker's dim room, all the curtains drawn, a desk lamp scattering its small circle of light by an armchair, Roll sat opposite Barty. Among Barty's small band, Roll had proven the most loyal and useful, so Barty kept him close. Are you certain you found something in that ring? From that ring? Roll stammered. Since leaving the Gaunt Shack, he had been equal parts excited and nervous. Barty did not look at him. He turned the ring in his hand, a jet-black stone set in an old band. He had not yet delved fully into the secrets held inside it, but he had unearthed enough to make him dangerously exhilarated. His voice was low, with an edge of obsessed madness. I can't be wrong. The Master put a curse on this. If it's just a curse... Roll stared at Barty and swallowed. If it's only a curse, it doesn't make sense that the Master would hide it just to mark his lineage. Barty looked at him with cold intensity. Roll wasn't stupid. He'd earned his place among the Death Eaters, but compared to Barty, he was blunt and unimaginative. This is not an ordinary family trinket, Barty said, voice tight with obsession. Ever since I took it, I can feel him in there. I haven't been able to speak with whatever's in it yet, but I'm certain the Master has been reminding me of things, his own way of telling me things. Roll involuntarily shivered. He was loyal to the Dark Lord, But his loyalty was conditional. It came with an eye on reward. Seeing men like Barty, whose devotion ran fanatical and reckless, made him nervous. It was like standing too close to a flame. For example? He asked cautiously. Barty's eyes darkened. Since I put the ring on, I've had images every night. Images of the Master escorting people to Hogwarts to find Dumbledore, trying to get the Defense Against the Dark Arts post. Images of him in a damp cave destroying an old locket and forcing a house elf to drink poison. Images of a witch, Hepzibah Smith, showing him a gold cup that had been in her family for generations. He looked murderous when he saw it. If I were merely tired, would I dream of him in an Albanian forest, finding a tall, thick spruce and reaching into its hollow to pull out a strange diadem? Roll's back was damp with sweat. No, that's not what I meant. The Master trusts you. He's trying to tell you something through these images. He wants you to know. Barty fell silent. Of course, the Master was trying to tell him something. The images and the ring were connected to the Master's secrets, and whatever had happened at the Potter's house that night might be linked to them too. He locked eyes with Roll, composed again, the mania ebbing into cold calculation. The Master has given me so much. The cup, the locket, the diadem, and this ring. It's likely they're all the same sort of thing. He could be hiding in one of those places, waiting for us. He placed the black gemstone ring back into his hand with careful reverence and spoke quietly. Now that you know, you're not to contact anyone else. Follow me. We will search everywhere I saw in my dreams. Bring the Master back. Dover, the short, familiar crossing to France, had always been the easiest route from Britain to the continent before the Channel Tunnel. A new port security guard, Garin Brooke, had started just that month. Compared with the old hands, who tended to clock in and spend the day gossiping, Brooke was watchful and conscientious. Young Brooke, one of his colleagues called, balancing a coffee. What are you still patrolling for? Worried about that convicted murderer they keep talking about on the telly? Sirius Black? Brooke didn't look up. He muttered, he might show up here. The man laughed. Then we'll be rich, £80,000 reward. I heard they're going to raise it. That settled the colleagues into a stream of speculative chatter about how they'd spend the money if any of them nabbed Black. Brooke didn't bother with their teasing. If he's wanted, why wouldn't he try to leave the country? He muttered, but his thoughts drifted into more fanciful territory. The police had already tightened security at the port. Anyone entering had to show identification, and officers checked every passenger ship between Dover and Calais. The private port security mostly had an easy job. Brooke, however, kept his eyes sharp, scanning like a hawk for anything off. An odd hat, sunglasses when it was plainly overcast, a face that seemed too well composed. That one's wearing a weird hat, he thought. Sunglasses inside. Blind, are they? Maybe faking it. Can't take my eyes off him. He watched a man in a too-neat robe, sequins catching what little light there was, following a man in a suit jacket and sweatpants and grinning with a too-bright smile. Brooke frowned at the pair. If someone pestering me like that kept at me, I'd grab him by the hair and give him a good smack. What he didn't notice was the shadow behind him, right where he'd seen nothing amiss. In the churning water, a sleek black shape slipped and paddled, subtle as a shadow. It was the black dog Brooke had guessed might belong to Mr. Webb, the caretaker who kept many dogs. The animal swam steadily, using a perfect dog paddle, crossing the channel toward Calais. There was a feral, almost human focus in its eyes, a grim determination. Far from Britain, Severus and the others had no idea what was happening. After a morning stroll around Paris, Severus had taken Harry and Draco to visit Nicholas Flamel's home. Reporters had already gathered in force, blocking the front of the modest building under a weathered iron sign that read, "Former residence of Nicholas Flamel." Muggles clustered, pointing and whispering. The crowd had been impenetrable, but Severus and his companions had used the Flu network from a wizarding bar in Paris to enter through Flamel's fireplace. That was the only way to get past the press. The house itself was nothing like the grand, stately place the boys had imagined. It was small, rather shabby, rooms full of alchemical instruments, old books, and glassware stacked in an apparent chaos that was, in fact, the visible trace of centuries of research. Flamel's alchemical workspace was open and unapologetic, Cauldrons, stills, burners, and large bottles filled with strange ingredients filled the room. Alchemy and potion-making overlapped, and it was clear that Flamel's skill in potions matched his reputation in alchemy. Harry and Draco examined some precise tools on a lab table and whispered that they might be used to brew the elixir of life. Draco, ever curious, kept glancing for anything that might be the Philosopher's Stone. The earlier quarrel between the two boys had vanished. Boys' spats burned bright and faded quickly, especially after a morning spent ogling the latest racing brooms in a shop window. "Would you like a pre-dinner biscuit?" Madame Flamel offered with a warm smile, carrying a tray of freshly baked cookies. Harry accepted eagerly. He was hungry after hours of walking. Draco straightened and inclined his head politely. "Thank you, madam," he said, giving Harry a faintly superior look that suggested Harry's manners were a trifle crude. Severus and Lupin sat with Nicholas in a corner of the living room, on old armchairs arranged like a small council. The two older wizards, both renowned for their achievements in potion-making and alchemy, were deep in discussion. Lupin, learned and thoughtful, contributed often enough to be part of the conversation, though he had no legendary breakthroughs of his own. "Since Isaac created star antimony," Nicholas said with a backward glance toward his cluttered lab, "few alchemists have produced anything that truly sings." Severus frowned. "In the early 20th century, there was a wizard named Waite in America. He translated runic alchemical works, and everyone said he had done remarkable things. That caused quite a stir in magical circles." Nicholas shook his head. "He was a fraud. American wizards are more fashion-driven. They'll do anything for fame or coin. When those reports were being passed around, I went to America to see these supposed advances myself. They refused to show me the ancient manuscripts they claimed to have translated and only presented shallow pieces, things any competent alchemist could have written. I realized there was no real new work. The translations were fake. Waite wanted fame and to sell books. He hid from me afterward, afraid I'd expose him." Severus and Lupin listened with surprise. They clearly hadn't known the backstory. When Nicholas mentioned his pocket watch research, Severus's expression shifted and he remembered something. "Speaking of pocket watches," he said, "in Nocturne Alley in Britain, I once bought something claimed to be one of your old alchemical pieces." Severus called Harry over. Harry was halfway through a cookie and had him pull out the silver pocket watch he'd bought for 20 galleons at Borgin and Burke's. Severus had paired it with a tracking spell. The watch could pinpoint its own location. Borgin had told them it was once Nicholas's alchemical work, but most of its functions were damaged, which explained the low price. Severus had never trusted a word Borgin said. Deal with him, and you might make a profit, but you would never be taking a loss. But this was the perfect chance to let Nicholas examine it for himself. Nicholas took the watch from Harry's hands and peered at it. Recognition spread across his face. "So it's this one," he said. Severus felt a thrill. Could this really be one of Nicholas's lost pieces? Then Nicholas added, and Severus's excitement stalled, "This is the work of Brad Benjamin, or at least one of the pieces from his batch." "Benjamin? Who's he?" Severus asked. Nicholas's eyes softened with memory. "A Beauxbaton graduate I met in 1950. He was an exceptionally gifted alchemist and had already made a name for himself while still young. More importantly, he had original ideas. You, as a potioneer, surely know that in alchemy and potions the crucial thing is often the idea itself," Nicholas went on. Benjamin was Muggle-born. His parents were ordinary folk who'd served as radio operators during the Muggle War, so he was well-versed in Muggle communication technology. He didn't forget that knowledge just because he went to a wizarding school. After succeeding in alchemy, he realized how backward wizards were when it came to transmitting information. In many ways, wizarding craft was highly developed, but for sending messages we still relied almost entirely on owls and the Flu network. Owls are inconvenient and slow. The Flu network requires ministry permission to connect fireplaces and isn't available everywhere. Muggle radio and wired telephones had limits too. So Benjamin conceived an alchemical device a witch or wizard could carry that would allow instant communication anywhere. Hearing this, Severus's expression turned subtle. Looking at the pocket watch again, a name came to him, the Little Genius phone pocket watch. Lupin, who'd been listening, brightened. "That's brilliant," he said. "If someone had finished that and patented it, they'd be famous and secure for life." Harry, who'd followed Nicholas's story, cocked his head and looked at the watch. "But the magical world doesn't have something like that now," he said. "Even this one was bought by Professor in Nocturne Alley." Why didn't Benjamin succeed? Severus and Lupin fell silent. Nicholas's face clouded. Because he died. At that, all three of them went still. "He first proposed the idea in 1967, Nicholas continued. By 1970, he'd moved to Oxford to apply for several alchemical patents in Britain and to consult English alchemists. He spent the following years there." Severus's jaw tightened as he worked the dates into context. "Those were the years the Dark Lord was most active in Britain," he said. Nicholas nodded. "Benjamin's background brought him trouble. Many of us wrote, urging him to leave such dangerous places and come home, but he kept at his work. He discovered something in a wizarding cemetery in Wales. He claimed that if he could crack the alchemical techniques there, he could complete his design. A few days after that discovery, he was found by a group of Death Eaters. The Ministry announced his death." The room fell quiet. Severus was thinking through meanings. Lupin shook his head, and Harry went pale. He hadn't expected the story to end that way. "This watch you bought in Nocturne Alley is probably one of his failed prototypes," Nicholas said finally, studying the worn case. "Even so, it must be one of the closest to success. The workmanship is very high. The positioning function is already present. All Benjamin lacked was a way to add instantaneous two-way communication. It has real alchemical value. Getting it for 20 galleons was a bargain. At the Alchemists' Association, many would likely pay 5 times that." He flipped the watch over and frowned. "But time has taken its toll, and there's been no maintenance. The positioning is a little off. I might be able to do some minor repairs, bring the tracking into better alignment, and make it more responsive." Lupin and Harry were still absorbed in the tragedy of Benjamin's death. For Harry especially, the story made the Death Eaters' that devastation feel very real and very close. Severus, having come back to himself, thanked Nicholas and asked quietly, "Did you never try to continue his work?" Nicholas shook his head. "I'm too old. In recent decades, I've produced little. My mind isn't as sharp as it was, and not even the elixir of life can staunch that decline. Besides, after Benjamin died, we don't know what happened to the notes and materials he left behind, whether the villains carried them off or they were destroyed. To pick up the research now would be extremely difficult." Their conversation wound down as Perenelle Lemme arrived with Draco to call them to lunch. The matter of the pocket watch was closed for the moment, but it was clear Harry hadn't treated it as merely a tale to hear at the Lemme house. The captured wizard was hidden on the plain. As they were preparing to leave the Lemme house, Nicolas Flamel took the initiative to give Harry and Draco small parting gifts. A copy of Alchemy, Basic Theory, apparently a textbook for Beauxbaton's alchemy class, and a silver tulip badge that neutralized unpleasant odors and emitted a faint, adjustable fragrance when worn. Harry was clearly more interested in the book. Draco carefully pocketed the badge as if planning to bring it home for his mother. Lupin escorted the two children to make final arrangements in Paris, while Severus returned to the French Ministry of Magic to finish and bottle the improved wolfsbane potion they had brewed there. He said goodbye to no one except Yuma. After leaving the ministry, he met up with Lupin and the others, and they headed straight for Charles de Gaulle Airport. When Yuma told Auror Supervisor Gerard that Severus and his party had left, the older man visibly could not sit still. "When did they leave?" he demanded. "Mr. Snape came to the ministry half an hour ago to pick up the items left here. He should be gone by now," Yuma replied. Gerard frowned. He hadn't expected Severus to depart so quickly and decisively. Seeing his reaction, Yuma hesitated and asked, "Are we actually going to stop him from leaving?" The question left Gerard momentarily speechless. The French ministry had no legal grounds to detain Severus. When he first arrived, he and Gerard had an agreement. The British assistance to the Auror headquarters was solely to rescue Nicolas Flamel. Even if they had failed, the British party had agreed to stay no more than 5 days. The 5-day period hadn't yet expired, technically, but now that Flamel had been rescued, there was no basis to force them to stay. Still, from Gerard's perspective, the case could not end simply because Flamel had been recovered. The French public wanted answers about the Lemay's safety, yes, but they would also not forget the other crimes committed by the gang of thugs. Those intruders had broken into the ministry and stolen confidential documents, a slap in the face to the entire French Ministry of Magic, and they had left the convent utterly destroyed. At noon, Aurors had found the Muggle staff and the adopted children from the ruined convent in another institution in Val-de-Marne, but the witch in charge, Amy, had vanished. The Muggles said Amy was dead. A band of ruffians had stormed the convent. She had attempted to protect the others and was struck down by many spells, and then the attackers had used a blasting curse to destroy the building, killing her in the flames. With such a murderous crime, the Aurors had an obligation to continue pursuing and investigating the assailants, who had already been identified as Death Eaters. The kidnapping of the Lemays also could not be ignored. Even if they were rescued, the perpetrators had to be arrested. From his interactions over the past days, Gerard had seen Severus's effectiveness. If they wanted to catch the offenders quickly, they needed him. If not to stay in France, at least to remain part of the joint investigation team combining British and French Aurors. Public pressure only intensified the need. Every newspaper in France wanted an exclusive with Severus and his party of 4. Requests and letters from editors were stacking up on Gerard's desk. The papers couldn't interview the Lemays, so they desperately wanted access to Severus. His few quotes that morning were hardly enough to satisfy them. After the Lemays' return, matters had become more complicated. Lacking any idea where Severus and his companions were headed next, the French ministry had no way to pursue them, even if it wanted to. Meanwhile, newspapers in both countries worked overtime. Extra editions were delivered that afternoon to wizarding households across Britain and France. The French, already worried about the Lemay kidnapping, found themselves whispering the names Severus Snape, Dudley Dursley, Draco Malfoy, and Remus Lupin. Unable to secure an interview, the papers tore into whatever they could uncover. Severus's past at Hogwarts in Slytherin, his shameful history, his return to teaching at Dumbledore's request, being the youngest dean in history, the mysterious 11, the prodigal son's sudden repentance, anything that made for a headline. Dudley Dursley, despite having fought a wand-wielding goblin alone, had no traceable family background. In Britain, he seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. Draco's pedigree made up for that. The only son of a well-known pure-blood supremacist family, suspected of turning his back on tradition, a juicy subject for columnists. Lupin's identity as a werewolf became public knowledge as well, completing the adventuring party image of the quartet. French readers wanted to know why this group had come to France and what they planned to do next. Without Severus to interview, newspapers filled pages with speculation and commentary to attract subscribers. In Britain, it was even more chaotic. 2 Azkaban escapes had recently plunged the wizarding public into panic. The Auror's failure to catch Black and Barty had produced a steady stream of howlers to the ministry. The Severus story was a perfect distraction. With a deliberate nudge from officials, the Daily Prophet ran the story on its front page. Just as Scrimgeour had intended, the populace, exhausted by fear, embraced the new narrative like a carnival. The French were weak, the headlines declared. Their living legend had been kidnapped, and in the end it was the British who rescued him. Their ministry had been violated, and it took a British boy to help drive the intruders away. The tale fed a victorious atmosphere that rippled across the wizarding community. None of that reached the 4 members of Severus's party as they prepared to board at Charles de Gaulle. Only Draco, staring through the terminal glass at the aircraft, looked dumbfounded. "Their broomsticks are enormous," he declared. "That's an airplane," Harry corrected for the 3rd time. Severus, folding a Muggle financial paper, looked up and said thoughtfully, "If you want a magical analogy, an airplane is more like a flying carpet, a mass aerial vehicle for carrying many passengers." Draco, who had never encountered such Muggle contraptions, could not conceive of them. Raised on the Malfoy family's belief in Muggle backwardness, He found it impossible to imagine how muggles could make something so large take to the air. Thoughts of the witch hunts and other frightening tales his mother had told him as a child swarmed his mind. His face shifted from astonishment to speculation, then to sullen fear. He pointed at the plane and said sharply, "Did the muggles capture wizards and stuff them into these things? Force them to use 42 to make these giants fly?" Harry, Lupin, and Severus fell silent. Draco, convinced he had uncovered a damning secret, grew angrier at their lack of response. "Are you not wizards?" he demanded. "How can you not be furious at this? I won't get on. I'm going to report this to the ministry." Harry looked him up and down in bafflement. Even with a spotty schooling, he understood the basic principles of flight. Draco's conclusion was absurd. Severus, irritated, seized a handful of Draco's pale hair and ruffled it. "With young Master Malfoy's vast experience," he said dryly, "can you name a single wizard who can fly unaided, who could lift a craft this size and carry all those passengers?" Draco opened his mouth, then shut it. The thought of a lone wizard lifting such a mass struck him as plainly impossible. His indignation faltered under the logic in Severus's tone. Lupin, carrying 2 cups of coffee and 2 ice creams they'd picked up for the children, let out a quiet chuckle and steered the conversation toward boarding instructions. The group moved forward, the massive muggle plane waiting at the gate, and the small, strange quartet, wizarding reputations already making headlines back home, stepped into another world entirely. 166. Chance encounter at the airport. By now, Draco realized he'd made a fool of himself. But given his temper, even when he knew he'd overreacted, he couldn't bring himself to back down. He jerked free of Severus's grip and began fishing for a flimsy excuse to justify his rant. Even if they weren't capturing wizards, he insisted, if muggles could build something like this, they must have stolen wizarding technology. If muggles could advance that far just by stealing, why did they wait until the last few decades to start? Lupin asked, handing Harry and Draco ice creams and passing a cup of coffee to Severus. Besides, wizards clearly don't have that kind of technology. Draco took the ice cream and turned his face away, pretending not to have heard, muttering self-justifying nonsense under his breath. Severus, Harry, and Lupin exchanged smiles. They were used to Draco's performances by now. They all knew the Draco before them had shed much of his old British prejudice. He was just thin-skinned and obsessed with saving face. His private thoughts and his public demeanor rarely matched. They were enjoying the brief calm when an argument nearby drew Severus's attention. "I'll say it one more time. Andrews is my cousin, and he has done a great deal of research on trolls, but I have absolutely no idea where he is." One voice insisted, "Please stop pestering me. I have normal resident status among muggles here. I'm allowed to take boats, trains, and planes. I don't know how you sneaked in, but I must remind you," the other man warned. The second man wore an odd mix of formal and casual, a suit jacket over sweatpants. He was balding, wore glasses, and clutched a briefcase, lowering his voice as he spoke. The youth pestering him wore a sequined emerald robe over jeans and had a perpetual smile plastered on his face. "I must warn you, casting spells on muggles is a violation of wizarding law," the balding man said. "In any country. If an Auror found out..." The flashy youth tossed his blonde hair and beamed. "Oh, my dear Angelo, you can't make such baseless accusations against a famous best-selling author who has won Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award 4 years in a row and who will surely win it a 5th time next year. How could I possibly cast spells on muggles? No one understands them better than I do. I know their transit. You have to buy a ticket, right? See, I have one." He flourished a plane ticket in front of the balding man. "And I'm not trying to pester you. I've been thinking about writing a masterpiece on trolls. I know those creatures. Creating such a work needs brainstorming, and this is a fantastic opportunity for your cousin. Just think, if the paparazzi found out an obscure wizard had assisted me, he'd become famous overnight." The balding man scowled impatiently. "Andrews doesn't like that. He's a quiet scholar and adventurer who spends his life unraveling mysteries. He isn't interested in fame." "No, no, no," the youth said with mock seriousness. "Those are just the shallow opinions of the fame-averse. Have you read Aesop? It's like the fox who can't reach the grapes and says they're sour. There are too many such foxes in the magical world, and their gossip makes people misunderstand what fame can do. And I can help your cousin break through that misunderstanding." The balding man had clearly had enough. "Then go find him yourself. I'm not some adventurer who researches trolls." The youth merely shrugged. He wasn't going to be put off by a few words. But as he prepared to persist, his gaze landed on Severus and the others seated on the bench at the gate. For a heartbeat, his expression flashed alarm, then swelled into delight. "Aha! Look who I've run into, Senior, Severus Snape!" The name made Harry, Draco, and Lupin turn their heads. Harry didn't recognize the speaker, but Draco squinted suspiciously, feeling a vague impression of familiarity. Lupin, however, was surprised. He hadn't expected to run into such a notorious figure from the British wizarding world in a Muggle airport. Severus's eyebrow rose. Rarely did he allow sarcasm to surface, but now he couldn't help the dry remark. "You've come all the way to France for inspiration, Lockhart?" The flashy, oily blonde before them was unmistakable. Gilderoy Lockhart, the wizarding world's best-selling celebrity. He'd won Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award 4 times, held the Order of Merlin, 3rd class, and been made an honorary member of the Dark Force Defense League. He stood there, all sequins and grin, like a man who had stepped onto a stage. The balding man who had been trying to shake him off turned at Severus's voice and brightened. "My goodness, Severus Snape, you're actually here!" He transformed instantly from annoyed to thrilled and hurried over. "I am a loyal fan of that book, Blood, Kin, Love, The Vampire and the Muggle. Not just me, my wife and children adore it too. We listened to the whole trial broadcast." He patted his briefcase and pulled the book out, evidently prepared for the moment. "Could you sign this? My wife will go mad with joy." Clearly this man was sincere. He had carried the book with him. Lockhart, standing nearby, suddenly looked awkward. His smile tightened, and his eyes flicked about as if he didn't know where to look. But his thick skin served him well. He swept forward, all charm. "Ha! Today must be your lucky day, Angelo," Lockhart exclaimed. "Meeting 2 stars of the wizarding world in a single day. If anyone heard about this, they'd faint with envy." The way Lockhart introduced himself made Harry and Draco stare at him, stunned and confused. They were still children. It was hard to believe anyone could be so shameless. The middle-aged wizard with glasses and a slightly bald crown, Angelo, looked furious at being pestered, and yet Lockhart never missed a chance to insert himself, eager to show off. Angelo plainly wanted nothing to do with him. After Lockhart's interruption, Angelo only frowned in disgust, signed his name on the book's title page with Severus's help, and rose to leave. Even Draco could see how relieved Angelo was to get away. Lockhart didn't care about the looks from Harry and Draco. He kept grinning and waving the plane ticket in his hand. "Hello, dear Angelo. Aren't you going to Tirana? If we're boarding that great iron bird, we should be waiting here together." Angelo came to an abrupt halt. With his back to Lockhart and Severus, he drew a deep breath, glanced at the ticket in his hand, and then checked the boarding sign. It was indeed the gate for the flight to Albania's capital. He sat down beside Severus and the others, set his briefcase on his knees, and, adopting an air of nonchalance, asked, "Are you going to Tirana as well?" Severus shrugged. "More or less. I hear the scenery's quite lovely, especially the natural landscapes. My cousin Andrews did some field work there, observational research on a population of trolls. It's supposed to be the largest gathering of trolls in Europe." I recall the name. He helped Hogwarts with textbooks on magical creatures, didn't he? "He did," Angelo said, pleased that Severus recognized the name. "He began as a magizoologist and once worked with Newt Scamander. Later, he struck out on his own and focused on studying trolls. Andrews is exceptional. If I hadn't sought his advice for my new work, it would be a shame," Lockhart piped up, settling down beside Angelo like an overeager guest. He wore the same smug expression as if the earlier awkwardness had never happened, oblivious to Angelo's thinly veiled disgust. "If we can collaborate this time, when my new book becomes a hit, well, Andrews will be famous too. Everyone will envy him for helping Gilderoy Lockhart on his masterpiece." Harry and Draco watched, mouths slightly open. "Is he a celebrity in the wizarding world?" Harry whispered to Draco. "Or a fraud? I've never met anyone like him." Draco curled his lip. "He's a celebrity, a best-selling author. My mother adores him, but after meeting him, he doesn't match the image. Angelo had every intention of ignoring Lockhart, but the man's persistence finally lit a fuse. Before he could speak, Severus turned his attention to Lockhart and said calmly, "You wrote the adventure books, did you not? So you're an adventurer yourself." Lockhart took the remark as praise and preened. "Ah, I scarcely realized it at the time, Professor Snape. I kept a low profile at school. No one discovered the excellence and ambition hidden within. Now I've thought of writing an autobiography. The title? Magical Me. It's only an idea for now. I must finish the other 2 books in my plan first." Severus lifted an eyebrow and let out a short chuckle. "You were low profile? Even in Slytherin you were talked about. Didn't you once claim you could produce a philosopher's stone by graduation? I assume you succeeded." "May I? May I show you?" Lockhart's chest swelled as he answered, completely at ease. "I didn't think you remembered my youthful plans. Yes, the philosopher's stone. Of course I succeeded. I ran into a few complications recently, so I left it at home. If I weren't on the way to visit Andrews on this trip to Paris, I would certainly have sought out Nicholas Flamel to discuss more of the stone's wonderful uses." He gave Severus a conspiratorial wink. "Keep the stone a secret, will you? If the press found out, they'd go mad, and infect my fans with that madness." Severus blinked as if indulging the absurdity, then went on. "And the England Quidditch team. Did you lead them to World Cup victory? I don't recall seeing your name on the roster." Lockhart's smile faltered, a drop of sweat appearing at his temple, but he recovered quickly and launched into another stream of fabrications. "Ah, you recall my Hogwarts House Cup exploits. Ravenclaw remembers the era when I led the team. As for the national side, I tried out. Their captain, Dane Maxwell, declared me a genius. They wanted me on the roster for the World Cup, but the regulations wouldn't allow them to name me after the tournament started. When my book Break with a Banshee came out, it caused a sensation. Fans pestered me daily for new work. Some said their lives were unlivable without it. So naturally, I postponed my plans to lead England to World Cup glory to satisfy public demand." The more he spoke, the more fluid and convincing his lies sounded. Harry and Draco, who had disliked him from the start, found themselves hesitating. Who could invent such bluster on the spot and make it sound so detailed? Severus, though, watched Lockhart closely and kept probing. "What about the promise you made at school, that you would become Britain's youngest minister for magic? How do you intend to enter politics?" Lockhart's smile stiffened. Sweat soaked the back of his shirt. He hadn't expected Severus to drag up the grand ambitions Lockhart had once loudly proclaimed at Hogwarts. In Lockhart's mind, Severus was someone who, like him, had manufactured a transformed public image, outwardly different from a shadowy past. Lockhart assumed the stories of Severus saving a vampire and a muggle and the powerful speech at a hearing were publicity stunts. Even so, he didn't want to offend such a potentially dangerous man. He'd planned to show goodwill. Under direct questioning, Lockhart rambled faster, as if forcing confidence would make it real. "Cornelius Fudge is a brilliant wizard. It's already certain he'll be Minister for Magic next year. We are very close. We often attend afternoon teas together to discuss mountain hags. Yes, mountain hag afternoon teas." He became almost giddy, clinging to his own words even as he doubted them. "I've suggested so many reforms to the ministry. He promised he'd take my proposals seriously and sweep away the ministry's old ills. He recently invited me to be a ministerial advisor when he takes office." He grew earnest, leaning forward. "But everyone knows my fame among the magical community. I worry that if I took the position publicly, people would say, 'Look, this young minister only succeeds because of Lockhart's advice.' That would make things awkward for Fudge and ruin our friendship. So I declined tactfully. I offered to advise him privately, and when the time is right, after his term ends, I'll prepare to run myself." He stood up as if giving a campaign speech. "When that time comes, you'll vote for me, won't you? The ministry will reach new heights under my leadership." A few muggles glanced over at the flamboyant display, but Lockhart basked in the attention. Harry and Draco exchanged bewildered looks. They could no longer tell if he was sincere or a consummate liar. Lupin's brow knit as he listened. He couldn't be sure about the truth of Lockhart's claims either, But between Severus's expression and what he remembered of Lockhart from school, Lupin suspected the author had a great propensity for invention. Angelo, by then, had long since plugged his ears. During the brief flight from Britain to France, Lockhart had filled the time with ever more extravagant boasts, claims of meeting obscure witches like Babbity the Rabbit Witch, and Angelo had had enough. Severus's gaze remained cool and appraising. Under it, Lockhart, who had spent so long convincing himself his lies were true, felt a ripple of unease. His smile lost some of its sheen as he sat. "Professor Snape, anything else you'd like to know?" Severus's examination ended. He smiled and shook his head once at Lockhart. "No. Lockhart, you are a true all-rounder. Literature, sport, politics. You seem to have reached the top in every field. It was a pity Dumbledore didn't keep you at Hogwarts as a teacher." At the praise, Lockhart brightened as if warmed by sunlight. "Oh, actually, I turned Dumbledore down then. Otherwise, Professor Snape, we would have been colleagues at Hogwarts long ago." 168. Capture a ghost. They didn't truly escape Lockhart's incessant chatter until they were on the plane. Whether any of his stories were true or not, the flamboyant young man had left no good impression on Harry or Draco. Angelo, however, was worse off. Lockhart had taken the seat next to him after check-in, which meant endless torment for the whole flight. Just before boarding, Angelo and Severus had spoken a little more, and Angelo had learned that their trip to Albania was mainly to explore primeval forests. His expression had gone a little unreadable. Later, while Lockhart switched his attention to Lupin and boasted about his latest werewolf research and plans for a masterpiece, Angelo quietly slipped a note into Severus's hand, met his eyes, and whispered, "Don't let that windbag find out. My cousin's out in the Albanian forests. I meant to find him on this trip, but stuck beside that nuisance. I won't be able to go over. If you want to go into the wilds, show my cousin this note. He'll welcome you," Angelo added. Severus accepted the unexpected favor without hesitation. He glanced at Lockhart, who was still tormenting the good-natured Lupin, and told Angelo softly, "Try to shake him off later. If you can't, tell him where your cousin is, and I'll intercept him and stop the harassment." Severus could have handled Lockhart whenever he chose, but they were not in Britain and had more important business ahead. Even if they sent Lockhart away, there wasn't time to deal with it properly. Using him as a teaching prop was pointless now that Harry had been brought out so early. If Lockhart behaved himself, Severus saw no reason to expose him just yet. Besides, he wasn't short of galleons on this trip. Their sponsor covered most costs, so they'd taken first-class seats. Still, since it was the first time Severus had taken the two boys on a Muggle plane, he wanted them to experience ordinary travel properly, which was why they had waited in the public lounge where they'd run into Angelo and Lockhart. Draco's seat was at the window. Once airborne, he watched the endless sea of clouds and the orange sun through the glass. He had never ridden a broomstick outdoors. Even Lupin, an adult wizard accustomed to flying, was astonished by the sight. Broomsticks seldom reached these heights. Above 10,000 meters, the air was near -50 and the oxygen thin. Without proper preparation, it would be difficult to endure. "The view's something, isn't it?" Severus said. Draco pretended nonchalance and curled his lip. "It's all right," he replied. Severus handed him a glass of juice from the flight attendant without calling him out. For comfort alone, planes beat broomsticks. Even the best broomsticks don't fully block the wind. Cars, ships, planes, those Muggle inventions are rather ingenious, he added. Draco said nothing. It wasn't that he didn't want to retort, but he couldn't find the words. Severus didn't press the point about Muggles any further. Instead, he asked quietly, "Do you know what the most valuable quality a person can have is?" Draco stared out the window and offered a list as if guessing. Kindness, cheerfulness, politeness. Sincerity, Severus said, or if you prefer, seeking truth from facts. Seeking truth from facts. Draco hadn't expected the phrase from Severus. Sounds simple. Severus shrugged. After a pause, Draco nodded. Severus smiled slightly. In reality, most people can't do it. They are swayed by rumor and gossip. Even without seeing something for themselves, they'll pass judgment. And sometimes, even when they do see the truth, people will hide it, deceive others or themselves because of where they sit and what interests they protect. Draco eyed him. Are you saying what my father taught me isn't true? From the moment I brought you out, have the principles he taught you about wizards and muggles proved useful? Severus asked seriously. I won't give you answers. I'll just take you to see. What you understand while we're out here will be yours to keep. If you do discover something, don't immediately blame Lucius for teaching you wrong. He had the same education you did. He never verified things for himself when he was young. Later, even if he recognized right from wrong, his position and interests began to shape his thinking. You are far from that stage. Since arriving, he had not lectured Draco on grand, abstract principles, just corrected rudeness and encouraged him to see for himself and speak up if he didn't understand. That, Severus thought, was far more useful. About 2.5 hours later, they landed in Tirana, Albania. First-class passengers had priority disembarkation, and none of them much wanted to hear Lockhart's voice or see his smiling face any longer. They made their way through the priority channel into the airport. Compared with the crush at Paris's Charles de Gaulle, Tirana was quiet. Severus pulled a pre-prepared map of Albania from his suitcase and laid it out in the VIP lounge. He explained their destination to Harry, Draco, and Lupin. The country isn't large, but about 36% is forested. Before we left Britain, I identified 6 primeval forests. He tapped 6 circles on the map. Rajka Beach Forest, Logara National Park, Fur of Hotova National Park, Theth National Park, Didi National Park, and Korab Koritnik Nature Park. In France, I gathered more information and narrowed them down. Rajka and Korab Koritnik can be excluded. They aren't pure primeval forests and have seen significant human intervention in the last century. Of the remaining 4, we'll head to Logara first. He pointed to the largest green area on the map. Logara is Albania's largest primeval forest, rich in species and with few human traces. The Mughal government has set a reserve around it. Only a handful of survival adventurers penetrate it. Most importantly, Angelo slipped me a note before the flight with the whereabouts of his cousin, Pike Andrews, an expert in troll research and a wizarding adventurer. Andrews has been through almost every uninhabited Albanian forest and visited the local troll tribes. He's in Logara now and can help us once we reach the area. Harry and Draco had no objections. They would follow where the adults led. Lupin, however, looked puzzled. He had thought Severus had merely taken the children on holiday to broaden their horizons. Now he realized Severus had a very specific aim in Albania. What do you intend to find in those forests? Lupin asked. Severus smiled, enigmatic. A ghost in an unusual state. A ghost? Lupin, Harry, and Draco all turned to him. Even Ghost Snape caught his breath. Compared to the others, Ghost Snape knew more about Severus's arrangements, the agreement with the Malfoys, who they were really seeking. He had even procured a special alchemical tool from Nicholas in preparation for the encounter. Yet in his mind, the whole enterprise had always seemed absurd. Taking 2 children under 10 and a werewolf, leaving Britain using Muggle transport, casually helping Aurors with a case in France, getting a mysterious parchment and a banshee's teacup from Nicholas, then flying straight to Albania to hunt through remote forests, possibly for the Dark Lord, a name most wizards dared not speak aloud. From the outside, it looked like a school summer camp. Still, Severus had always moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Yes, Severus went on, a ghost, a weak, incorporeal one that survives by parasitizing animals, hiding in some forest in this country, too afraid to appear. That forest's huge, Harry burst out. How can we possibly find it? We're not looking for a mere phantom, Severus said. A phantom is dead. This is alive, just without a body. Lupin listened, but did not press further. Severus's tone had been too casual to give the impression he feared the thing. With their destination and objective set, they wasted no time. They took a taxi from the airport to a car rental agency in Tirana, hired a vehicle, and drove toward Logara National Park. They reached a town near the park before dark and checked into an inn for the night. Meanwhile, back in France, on a seafood lorry heading from Calais to Paris, a large black dog slipped off under cover of night. It shook itself, scattering seawater and grime, then prowled through Paris's streets and alleys. It was clearly unfamiliar with the city, but by midnight it had found the hidden, ancient wizarding enclave beneath the bustling capital. The dog did not reveal any human form. It moved silently into the largest wizarding shopping street in Paris, precisely the street Severus had taken Harry and the others before visiting the LeMay family. The black dog had no idea of that connection, but the moment it reached the street, its unusual eyes fixed on a discarded newspaper by a trash can. The headline was in French, unreadable to the dog, but the photograph beneath it needed no translation. In the picture, Harry, Draco, and Lupin were surrounded by reporters. Draco, worrying about his family's reputation, kept pushing Harry forward to shield himself. That image was etched into the dog's memory. Its eyes filled with a cold, concentrated fury. 169. Barty's Harvest. Roll could smell the sea and hear the surf. He stood on a tall black rock jutting up from the water, waves rolling and foaming at his feet. A cliff towered behind him, its sheer face dropping straight down into shadow. Several huge boulders, like the one he and Barty stood on, had clearly broken away from that face long ago. The place was bare and desolate. Beyond the endless water and stone, there was no tree, grass, or beach in sight. "Where is this?" Roll muttered, following cautiously behind Barty. "An island off the English coast," Barty replied without looking back. He stared at the great rocks half submerged around the cliff, his eyes bright with excitement. "Some muggles come here for holidaying, but most of the time no one does." How did you find this place?" Roll asked, scanning the bleak landscape. Barty pointed to his temple. "The ring the master left to me showed me images. This place was one of them." Roll's fear eased a little, but the damp, salty breeze still made him shiver. "Where do we go now?" Barty did not answer. He raised his wand. Lumos. A golden light bloomed at the tip of his wand and cut into the black rock wall. In that glow, Roll could see a crack in the cliff, dark seawater churning within it. "How are your swimming skills?" Barty asked suddenly. Roll blinked. It took him a few seconds to realize what Barty meant. The young man had already shrugged off his outer robe and tossed it onto a nearby reef, revealing a fitted shirt and trousers beneath. His question had been rhetorical. He didn't care what Roll answered. With a practiced crouch, Barty slipped into the water and began to swim toward the crack, wand clenched between his teeth, his strokes efficient and fast. Golden light flickered between the crack and the sea's surface. Roll hurriedly stripped and followed. He could swim, but his style was clumsy compared to Barty's. After coughing up a mouthful of cold, seaweed-tangy seawater and frantic thrashing, he finally kept up. They pushed through the crack into a dark tunnel and swam a long way. Just when the cold had numbed Roll's fingers, he saw Barty climb up onto solid rock ahead and then step back. Roll did the same, coughing and hacking. "Don't vomit in the water. We may have to swim back out," Barty said in a flat voice. Roll swallowed, choking. Barty's face, however, had lit with thin delight as he hurried up a set of clearly man-made stone steps. Roll grumbled, but followed into a large cavern. They cast drying charms on their sodden clothes. The chill left their garments, but Roll's unease remained. There seemed to be no obvious path forward. How are we supposed to get through?" he asked. Barty didn't look at him. He ran a hand over the stone wall in front of them, then flicked his wand. No spoken incantation, just a light motion. Nothing visible happened to the rock, but something flickered in Barty's eyes, an obscure, profound recognition. A smile creased his face. "It's here," he breathed. "Only the master could set this. It rejects intruders. Even his most loyal servant must leave something behind to enter." "Something? What?" Roll began, alarm crawling up his spine as he noticed Barty was holding a short blade that was not a blade at all, but a dagger produced by Transfiguration. He took an involuntary step back. "Don't be afraid. I'm not taking your life." Barty stepped in front of him and, without hesitation, sliced Roll's arm with the dagger. "Ah!" Roll's cry echoed as warm blood spattered across the stone in a pattern like blooming plum blossoms. "Stop screaming," Barty said coolly. He flicked his wand at the wound. The skin sealed instantly. The pain vanished, but the blood already spilled would not return. A pale, white archway bloomed on the cave wall where the blood had landed. The blood-flecked stone inside that arch vanished, and the opening revealed a doorway leading into blackness. "Follow me." Roll hesitated, then stepped through, feeling every tremor in his limbs as if the sea itself had worked its chill into his bones. They emerged onto the shore of a vast black lake. The surface stretched away until the far bank was invisible. Overhead, the cavern soared out of sight. Barty breathed in the sea-tinged air and moved along the shore, eager now. Hurry up. Even if the master isn't here, he would hide something of great value in a place like this. Roll clung to the edge of the rocky path but kept his distance. The lake lay calm as a mirror, save for a hazy green glow at its center. Then Barty halted at the edge, one hand clenched as if around something unseen. He tapped that fist with his wand. With a shudder from the lake's depths, a thick, green, coppery chain surfaced, and he hauled a small boat up from the dark water. Roll stared. He had thought the ring had simply shown Barty a location. Now it was clear the young man possessed talents beyond mere revelation. He pulled the boat ashore and found it would carry only one across to the green-lit center. Barty shoved Roll into the boat first, despite his terrified protests. No amount of begging eased the cold steel in Barty's eyes. Barty cast a spell on himself that made him float like a balloon, and Roll, clutching Barty's sleeve, was drawn along in the boat. They sped toward the center. As they moved, Roll saw the water churn with pale forms, countless in fairy. Cold as corpses, hands rose from the black water toward the boat. Roll's grip tightened until his knuckles whitened. He kept his eyes locked on Barty, who never glanced at the things in the water. His attention was fixed solely on the green light ahead. The light resolved into a small islet, and on it, a stone basin filled with a shimmering, phosphorescent green liquid. Barty's whole frame trembled with a mix of reverence and excitement. This was it, the place the ring had shown him, where the master had hidden a 3. He transformed his wand into a goblet and pressed it into Roll's hands. "Use this to scoop the liquid from the basin and drink it," Barty ordered. Roll stumbled back. "You can't make me. That will kill me. You don't even know what that is." "It won't poison you to death, I'm sure of it." "Drink," Barty said impatiently. "If you're so certain it's harmless, why don't you drink first?" Roll kept backing away until his heel found the water. Pale, marble-like fingers had already reached up and curled around his ankle from the previously mirror-calm lake. "No! Let go! I want to go back!" he screamed. More hands surfaced and snagged at him, the inferi roused and ravenous, trying to pull a living body down to join them. A flare of fire sparked from Barty's wand, crimson and vicious. The inferi recoiled from the light and heat. Seizing the opening, Barty yanked Roll back by the hair and pressed his face close, his voice colder than the sea. "If you drink what's in the basin, you won't die now. But if you refuse, I can't promise those things won't have an extra midnight snack tonight." Roll's face drained of color. He was tall among the ragged lot Barty had assembled, but that meant little. There was no courage in him now. Under that merciless gaze, he stumbled forward, hands shaking, and lifted the goblet. He scooped a measure of green light with a trembling hand, forced his lips to the rim, and swallowed. He felt nothing, no taste, no burning, as if nothing at all passed his throat. He set the cup down, but panic rising in him made him want to stop. Barty's stare pinned him. He scooped a second cup. The second finished, he sagged to his knees. "No, I can't. I want to go back. I don't want to drink anymore." His voice was thin and raw. Barty's face showed no mercy. He took the goblet from Roll's slack hand and scooped another portion. He forced it into Roll's mouth and held it there until Roll swallowed, then did it again and again. Each time Roll reached for the cup, he drank like a man forced by thirst. Finally, the basin was empty. Lying quietly in the stone was a small gold object, the 3-3. Barty let the cup drop, ignoring Roll's rasping cries for water. He stared at the item as if it were a sacred relic, his eyes bright with a fierce light. Then he reached down and lifted the gold thing from the basin. 170 Albanian forests. At dawn, Severus and the others set out for Logara National Forest in Albania. The area was protected by the Muggle authorities, but that mattered little to wizards. They found a gap in the fence just wide enough for Harry and Draco to squeeze through. Lupin and Severus apparated into the woods. Across so vast a landscape, Severus knew he could not expect instant success, finding a fragment of Voldemort's soul hiding in some animal, even with Harry, the Dark Lord's living connection, at his side. According to the original account, after Voldemort's killing curse rebounded that night, he had slunk into the Albanian forest and stayed, terrified and cautious. Those woods had an unusual property. They blocked almost every form of magical detection and inquiry. It was why Ravenclaw's daughter had fled there long ago after she stole her mother's diadem. Voldemort had learned of the place, taken the diadem's hiding place from the Grey Lady, and, knowing the forest's peculiarity, had used it as a refuge. When he was at his weakest, he had hidden here and dared not leave until Quirinus Quirrell, then Hogwarts Muggle Studies professor, arrived in Albania, met him, and fell under his spell. Quirrell's fate convinced Severus that a weakened soul fragment lingered in those trees, no longer a full threat. Voldemort, obsessed with avoiding death, could not accept his diminished state. He would wait for a faithful follower to come find him. In the original timeline, that follower never did arrive. The Dark Lord had to leave with Quirrell. Now Severus had come. As the man who had once delivered the prophecy to Voldemort, Severus expected to be regarded as a true devotee. When Voldemort had asked him to spare Lily Potter, Severus had kept his promise. Only Lily's refusal to step aside and her choice to shield her son had led Voldemort to strike. If Severus found the weakened Voldemort here, he believed he would be trusted far more than Quirrell. He had not come empty-handed either. He had brought Harry. Harry's presence served two purposes. First, the boy might sense Voldemort's presence and help find him quickly. Second, once they found him, Harry could be used as a lure to demonstrate Severus's loyalty. The most faithful servant would not only have tracked down his master, but would have delivered the enemy of his fate. Severus imagined Voldemort delighted and trusting. Then, when the time came, he would produce the teacup they had obtained from Nicholas Flamel and invite the Dark Lord to enter of his own free will. It was the plan Severus had constructed. He did not expect everything to go exactly as hoped, but one thing was certain. At this moment, Voldemort was weaker than he had ever been since first becoming a wizard. If Severus did not take this gamble in Albania and allowed the old course of events to unfold so the Dark Lord left with Quirrell, things would become harder to fix. Still, the forest was vast. He was prepared for a long search. If the trip yielded nothing, he would tail Quirrell when the professor left for his holiday. Harry and Draco were unmistakably excited. Neither Malfoy Manor nor the Dursleys' house had ever offered a real primeval woodland. Everything around them was new and fascinating. Severus and Lupin had prepared in France, brewing insect-repellent potions far stronger and longer-lasting than any Muggle spray, so the forest's worst nuisances were not a worry. "What's that?" Harry asked, pointing to a creature on a branch, a mouse-like head on a Dachshund's slim body, long tail, gray fur, watching them warily. A book hovered beside Severus, Traveling Wizard, Albania edition, bought in Britain. It contained the country's terrain and a bestiary of the mundane and magical animals that lived there. As Harry asked, the book flipped its pages on its own and, aided by a brightening, revealing potion, displayed a vivid illustration identical to the animal on the branch. "That's a stone marten," Severus read from the caption and explained. "Found across Europe and Asia. Not unique to here, but not common either." As a nature reserve, the place was a paradise for wild creatures. Besides smaller animals, they had already encountered large ones, brown bears, deeper in the forest. To wizards, such predators were nothing. With Severus and Lupin present, there was no danger. From the moment they entered the woods, they had headed due west, following a note Angelo had left for Severus. Angelo's adventurer cousin, Andrews, was somewhere in these trees, in a valley called Olivera. That valley lay at the forest's heart, a gathering place for magical beasts, warded against muggles by the Albanian Ministry of Magic. It contained a wealth of magical flora and fauna, and even a colony of trolls. According to Angelo, Olivera would be Andrews's last stop in Albania. He planned to stay 2 years before leaving Europe for Egypt. They walked and paused at leisure, spending the whole day among the trees. Several times they almost lost their way, and each time Harry rose on the goblin-crafted trophy, a flying skateboard, to spot distant peaks and correct their course. The goblins had clearly designed the board for lighter loads. Severus and Lupin were too heavy. Only someone Harry's size could ride it. But a flying skateboard was nothing like a broomstick. Harry hovered just above the treetops, afraid to shift his weight, much less swoop about as smoothly as the goblins had. Still, his talent showed. After only 3 flights, he was already getting the knack, less wobbly, and beginning to enjoy a different kind of thrill than broom flight. Draco envied the trophy plainly, but his pride kept him from asking. Harry saw the conflict and spent the day showing off, needling the air until near dusk he made one final ascent to check their position. Then, pretending his legs were too stiff to stand, he politely asked Draco for help. Pride won at last. Draco agreed. "I'm only doing this because you begged. Don't think I care." Draco repeated the claim to Harry, then, for good measure, to Lupin and Severus. "Yes, yes, please, young Malfoy. Help me." Harry nodded furiously, earnest. The instant Draco looked away, he almost laughed. Once on the board, Draco was elated. He drew a deep breath and, trying for calm, announced, "I was riding toy broomsticks at 3. A flying skateboard is nothing. Watching you panic this morning was priceless." "Keep your balance. Don't fall," Lupin advised kindly. Draco bristled like a cat who'd been trodden on. "You think I'm worse than Dudley?" Lupin shrugged. He wasn't going to argue with a child. "I told Dudley the same thing his first time, didn't I?" Severus said nothing. He slipped his wand from his sleeve as if he already knew what might happen. Moments later, Draco, copying Harry's first motion, stepped onto the board and pushed off the ground. The skateboard lifted him into the air. The new sensation thrilled him, but he could not steady himself. He swayed wildly and crouched low to keep balance. "Are we still heading the right way?" Harry shouted up. Draco was transfixed by the sea of green below. The sinking sun set the clouds afire, and the forest rolled beneath like true ocean waves. Flocks of unknown birds burst upward from the trees. While he stared, the board suddenly shuddered. Draco screamed. 171, a terrible combination. As expected, Draco fell off the skateboard. He'd been too busy drinking in the scenery to pay attention to his balance. Amid a violent wobble, he screamed and plunged from a height of more than 10 meters. "Ah!" Just as his pupils constricted and his body plunged through a tangle of leaves, the ground, a carpet of dead leaves and big, coarse weeds, loomed in his vision. An invisible force suddenly caught him, bringing him to a dead stop less than a meter above the ground. Before Draco could breathe a sigh of relief, though, the lifting force vanished. Unprepared, he fell the rest of the way and landed face first in the grass in a humiliating heap. Harry burst into laughter, but before he could laugh twice, horror washed over him. His trophy, the flying skateboard, had shot off like an arrow. Come back! Come back!" he called, panic in his voice, but the skateboard kept going. Just as Harry's despair peaked, Severus waved his wand and cast Actio. The skateboard obediently reversed course like a dog returning to its master, wobbling as it flew back into Harry's hands. Relief flooded Harry. At his age, he couldn't have a broomstick, and this skateboard, caught with his own hands, was the closest thing he had to flying. "Goblins must have their own peculiar control systems," Severus said, rubbing his chin as he handed the skateboard to Harry. "When we visit Mr. Lemai's place, we should ask him to improve it." Draco remained prone, rear end in the air, face buried in the grass, as if he could not accept the embarrassment. Harry carefully stowed the skateboard in his satchel, then circled Draco with obvious amusement, stretching his leg out and measuring against Draco's backside as if deciding the right angle for a goal kick. He didn't actually kick. If he had, it would have provoked a fight. But he drawled, teasing, "How was the scenery from up there? How did it feel to fall from the sky? Was the grass soft? Did it taste bitter?" Severus and Lupin ignored the boys and began setting up a traveling tent they had bought in Diagon Alley. It was the sort of tent with an undetectable extension charm legally registered with the ministry. From the outside, it looked like a small canvas shelter, but inside it opened out into a roomy space with 4 bedrooms, a living room, and even a little kitchen. This sort of tent had to be carried separately and couldn't be packed inside a trunk already under an undetectable extension charm, so Lupin had always kept it apart. With a few quick spells and some simple staking, the tent was up. By then, Draco had scrambled to his feet, his face flushed from Harry's taunts and itching for a fight. Before he could make a move, Harry had already climbed a fir tree. Escaping and climbing had been survival skills he'd learned early, otherwise Dudley's fists would have finished him off long ago. Draco couldn't follow and could only glare up from below. They bickered for a while. Draco called Harry a coward, and Harry mocked Draco for not being able to climb a tree. It wasn't until Lupin, wearing an apron, stepped out of the tent to call them to dinner and sent Draco off to fetch firewood that Harry finally climbed down. Once they were seated around the dinner, Draco had no stomach for more trouble. He still felt embarrassed, so he ate in silence. After the meal, when Severus and the others invited him to play cards, he refused and sat by the tent entrance, hugging his knees, staring at the moon. There wasn't much moon to see in the forest. The canopy blocked most of the sky. Only narrow gaps let slivers of light through. From inside the tent came the ruckus of a card game. 3 jacks. Bluff. I call you. Hey, Lupin must be cheating. He always knows my cards. I don't cheat. Whenever you lie, your eyes move a bit. Besides, I have 4 jacks. The odds of you holding 3 more are negligible. Lying is an art. Dudley, your teacher's giving you another lesson. Stick 1 more on his face. Listening to that noise, Draco sat with his chin in his hands, and a strange, unreal feeling washed over him. A week ago, he'd been a young master in a rich household, enjoying a privileged life and looking down on everyone who wasn't him. Now he was in the woods, sitting on a bed of dead leaves and smashed insects, watching the moon. Behind him were no parents, no fawning pure-blood playmates, only his father's half-blood friend, a wandering werewolf, and a peer who knew everything about muggles. A short while ago, he hadn't thought much of Snape, but now, this moment didn't feel terrible. Draco blinked, bewildered. He wasn't sure whether he was losing his mind or had been subtly reprogrammed by Severus and the others, but by any measure the company and the scene were worse than what he'd always been taught to accept. Yet somehow, sitting there, it felt not bad. A loud groan from the tent announced another loss. Dudley's lost 7 rounds in a row. Your turn, Draco. Severus called over the rim of the tent. Draco muttered, I don't want to play, but his feet had already moved toward the entrance. Hurry up. If Dudley loses any more, there won't be any room left on his face for paper strips. I really can't help you lot, Draco grumbled, patting his rear as he stood and walked toward the 3 people whose faces were already plastered with white strips from the game. He couldn't help the small, reluctant smile that tugged at his mouth. It wasn't as bad as he'd imagined. Right? 172. Giants in the Valley. After 2 days of trekking, on the 3rd day inside the forest, Severus finally felt the presence of magic. Compared to the areas they had passed through before, there were noticeably fewer signs of human activity here. Only a strong Muggle-repelling charm cast over this whole region could account for it. As they pushed deeper into the mountain wood, ordinary wild animals that had been everywhere before thinned out, replaced by creatures his old wizarding field guides had only mentioned. It's a bundamun, Lupin said, pointing at a slightly green fungus with eyes. Startled by his voice, the little thing extended countless thin, long limbs and scurried away. Draco saw something he'd never seen before nearby. At first glance, it looked like a fleshy pink mushroom, but passing a large tree, he discovered a whole colony, a sprawling cluster occupying an area nearly the size of a basketball court. He felt a wave of revulsion. What are those? Severus glanced toward him. Horklumps. They used to be confined to the Scandinavian peninsula, but they've spread across most of Europe. They have strong tentacles buried in the soil and feed on earthworms. Their reproductive rate is high. Northern European wizard gardens suffer badly from them. A pint of Streeler venom will clear them up. They skirted the Horklump colony, but a few steps later, Harry felt his scalp itch. Reaching up to scratch, he found a furry creature perched on his head. He yelped, drawing everyone's attention. Severus and Lupin relaxed at once when they saw it. Relax, Dudley. Don't be afraid. That one's not malicious, Severus said. It likes you. You can try to lift it off. Harry was still tense, frozen as if hit by a minor petrificus, but slowly he used both hands to lift the round, soft, hairy thing from his head. It was a little ball, fleshy and covered in smooth, custard-yellow fur, with a pair of beady black eyes looking at him. Draco sniffed dismissively. Puffskein. Harry had never heard the name before, but seeing the fluff ball in his hands, his fear evaporated. He held it up in wonder. Puffskein? That's what it's called? Yes, wizards keep them as pets. They're harmless and eat almost anything, especially dried boogers, very popular in wizard households. Harry liked the little creature at first, but hearing it like boogers made him slightly squeamish. He cupped it and set it gently on the ground. The puffskein blinked at him, expectant. "I don't have any boogers for you," Draco snorted. "You definitely do. Otherwise, why would it pick you?" Harry ignored him, but the puffskein promptly rolled back toward him and pressed itself against his leg, blocking his path. It kept looking up at him with those black eyes. Harry looked helplessly at Severus and Lupin. Lupin smiled. "They're clean, not as difficult to keep as you might think, and it clearly likes you. If you can accept it, why not keep it for now?" Severus suggested. After a moment's hesitation, Harry picked the puffskein up again. It was delighted, rolling in his hands and blinking its tiny eyes. "They like being tossed a little in your hands," Lupin said. "Being magical animals, they're not easily hurt. You can be less careful." Under Lupin's guidance, Harry tossed the puffskein once and caught it. It bounced happily. He began to enjoy having a small pet. Meanwhile, Severus had been scanning the canopy and the surrounding trees since the puffskein's arrival. When Harry started showing off his new companion to Draco, Lupin noticed Severus's unusual attention. "Everything all right?" Lupin asked. Severus shrugged. "I can't say for sure. Wild puffskeins usually live in groups. This one has no companions." "Maybe it got separated during a migration," Lupin offered. "It happens. Larger groups mean more stragglers." Severus agreed outwardly, but discreetly tapped the puffskein with his wand. No one saw what he did. They pressed on. The farther they went, the more magical creatures they encountered, some dangerous, but both Lupin and Severus handled them with ease. When a dangerous species moved in packs, they deliberately skirted them to protect Harry and Draco. On the evening of the fourth day, they reached a valley ringed by low hills. Trees were sparser here. Several bore signs of having been broken by hand. The ground opened out, and a clear stream that branched from a forest river ran through the valley. Lupin, who had spent a lifetime wandering, narrowed his eyes. "This place would suit humanoid magical tribes," he said. Severus didn't answer. He pointed toward the stream. "Look there." They followed his finger. Under a large tree by the water stood a giant, its dull, coarse skin like granite. The creature looked absurdly disproportionate. A hulking body like a small hill leaning against the tree, topped by a tiny bald head like a coconut. Huge, fan-like ears stuck out at the sides, making it look even more grotesque. Harry and Draco both inhaled sharply. Even at a distance, the presence of the creature pressed on them. Severus studied the giant and asked Lupin, "Have you studied troll speak?" Lupin shrugged. "A sentence or two. Britain's leading expert was the elder Barty Crouch, your friend. His learning is respected throughout the magical world, though it's a pity he didn't know how to raise his son. Because of his son, even if the ministry had some respect for his service, it would still have sent him to Tristan Wizarding Prison," Severus said. "We won't be getting his help, so we'll have to manage ourselves." The puffskein had made Harry's shoulder its new nest. Seeing Severus and Lupin step forward, Harry and Draco shared a look, and then, despite their anxiety, followed the adults. The troll slept in the shadow of the tree, but when they closed to 20 meters, its fan-like ears twitched. It opened its eyes and barked an unintelligible roar. "Wah, Gulu!" It grabbed a wooden club larger than both boys combined and scrambled to its feet. Severus drew his wand but held back, letting Lupin step forward to try a few halting grunts in troll speak. "Gulu wah, wuha, ludong ming," Lupin stammered, sincere but clearly not fluent. The troll took the attempt as provocation. It reared back to bring the club down on Lupin. Draco shut his eyes. Harry wanted to leap forward and shove Lupin aside. The club never landed. Severus had flicked his wand and cast Expelliarmus. A creature with thick skin and innate magical resistance comparable to a dragon's should have shrugged that off, but the spell disrupted the club's momentum enough to spoil the swing and give Lupin a chance. The troll fumbled its weapon. Lupin dodged free and drew his wand. "Transfiguration!" he called to Severus. Severus had already thrown a bottle of potion toward the troll. The bottle shattered at its feet, splashing a pale green liquid across the grass. He waved his wand. Lupin echoed the movement. Where the liquid soaked the ground, the soft grass shivered and then exploded upward like vines shooting into the air. Spells completed the transformation. The living grass shifted into metallic, silver-white strands. By the time the troll wrested its club back, it found itself imprisoned in a cage of iron vines. It grabbed at the bars desperately, but strength meant little against that sudden, magically reinforced prison. The creature roared and battered the cage, shaking the ground. "He's calling his companions," Lupin warned. The earth's tremor intensified. From the valley poured a thunder of footfalls, not horses, but dozens of forest trolls in grass skirts, heavy clubs clenched in their hands. Their low, continuous grunting rippled as they charged. Harry reflexively grabbed his wand from his satchel. Draco went a step backward, pale. Severus, however, remained composed, even sheathing his wand. Among the charging trolls was a short, round figure running ahead, a wizard in robes, messy brown hair, who moved with an agility that didn't match his bulk. He darted to the front of the group, accompanied by a smaller troll, clearly a juvenile, and noticeably sharper than the others. The robed man waved his arms and shouted, breathless, "Wait, wait! I said wait! Lulu, stop them!" Under the intervention of the short, round wizard, the rowdy band of trolls actually quieted down. They still looked uneasy, but the aggressive edge had gone from them. The smaller troll, called Lulu, kept grunting in troll speak to its fellows, while the wizard turned to Severus and the others with a wary expression. "Who are you?" he asked seriously. "This is the Albanian Magical Creatures Reserve. Any harm to the creatures here is treated as poaching. You'll be held responsible." Severus pulled the note Angelo had given him from his robes, stepped forward and asked, "Are you Mr. Peake Andrews?" Andrews' face registered surprise. "Yes, I'm Andrews, and you are?" Severus handed over the note. "Angelo sent me. He said you've been through almost every forest reserve in Albania in recent years." Andrews studied the paper, skepticism written across his features. After reading, he frowned. "He said you were friends and that I could help, but why didn't he come with you? He told me he'd stop by before leaving Europe." "He's tied up at the moment," Severus said. "When we got off the plane, he told me he had other matters to attend to in Albania. He'll join us when he can." Andrews scratched his head and relaxed a little. "Right. Angelo said you lot are well known back in Britain. Sorry, I've been wandering the deep mountains and forests for years. I don't keep up with the outside world." He offered a hand. Severus shook it. "Severus Snape, novice adventurer. This is Remus Lupin, a more experienced one." Lupin rolled his eyes slightly at Severus's modesty, but reached out just the same. "These two are Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy. They're young, have not reached school age yet. We've brought them along." Andrews regarded the two boys behind Severus with a bemused expression. "I've never seen anyone take such young wizards out on an expedition. Their parents must be bold." At that moment, the smaller troll, still over 10 feet tall and thickly built, strode forward, its heavy feet thudding on the ground. "Peake, save it, save." It actually spoke a few English words. Severus and Lupin exchanged looks of astonishment. Trolls were famously dim. On any sensible scale of intelligence, they were near the bottom. A few spoken words of English among trolls were rare. Even those employed as guards by the Ministry or Gringotts didn't often show that grasp of language. This Lulu seemed unusually bright. "Is this troll naturally clever?" Severus whispered to Lupin. "Like the odd, mentally gifted child among humans?" "Not necessarily," Lupin murmured back. "Even if someone studies trolls, you can't change their brains entirely. The Ministry has Dementor researchers, too. Does that mean Dementors behave? A troll's mind is largely set at birth." Andrews turned back and addressed them. "If you'll release Jackman, he'll calm down. He likes to nap outside the valley and can be grumpy in the morning. If he offended you, I apologize." Severus waved his wand. The iron-like cage that had been woven from vines reverted to ordinary plants. With a grunt, Jackman yanked free and charged out, snorting steam and looking for trouble. But Lulu bounded up and kicked him in the rear with a massive foot. The blow seemed to take the fight out of him. He scratched his bald head and looked hurt rather than angry. Lulu herded him back into the group, beating and scolding him with a wooden club, and the dozen or so trolls finally put down their crude weapons and drifted back toward the valley in twos and threes. "You're welcome to come with me," Andrews said. "If there's anything I can do to help, I will." They accepted. The four followed Andrews along a stream into a bowl of mountains. The water pooled into a small lake that lay like a mirror between the hills, the sky reflected in it. The trolls had cleared the trees and set up a primitive camp by the shore. Sheds of rough wood, each barely big enough for one troll, with hay for bedding. In the middle of the makeshift settlement stood a slightly more finished log cabin. Compared to the crude sheds, it looked like a mansion. Inside, the room was a disaster. Sheets of parchment scrawled in different hands lay scattered. Books jostled potions and ingredients on rickety shelves. Cauldrons, spirit lamps, suitcases, and half-unfolded tents cluttered every surface. Andrews flushed with embarrassment and waved his wand. Sorry, I live alone and I'm too lazy to tidy. My house elf," he broke off, chuckling awkwardly, "isn't great at housekeeping." Under the spell, the mess hovered and then dropped into a corner in a heap, clearing a small space. Andrews dragged out a few crude wooden chairs and set a table. "Please, have a seat. A bachelor who's always traveling doesn't get much time to clean." Severus and Lupin didn't mind. Both were used to Spartan conditions. Harry was busy keeping his new pet from raiding the cupboards, while Draco sat stiffly and looked disgusted. Andrews bustled about and then sat. "Angelo said you came here for an adventure. Looking for recommendations, are you?" Severus shook his head. "We have a specific goal. We're searching for a legendary ghost." "A ghost?" Andrews frowned. Severus couldn't say what he and his companions really sought. Mentioning Voldemort's remnant soul would only send Andrews away, so he adapted the truth into something suitable for an expedition. "There's a story about a ghost that haunts the Albanian forests. I read about it in the restricted section at Hogwarts. It's connected to the daughter of Ravenclaw, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. He killed his love in the forest, then took his own life from guilt. His obsession left him a wandering ghost." Both Andrews and Lupin listened with growing interest. The tale had the ring of legend, but also more detail than most such stories, which made it feel oddly credible. Andrews asked, puzzled, "What's this ghost have to do with you? Why find it?" Severus had an answer ready. In a low voice, he asked, "Have you heard of Ravenclaw's diadem?" Andrews' eyes widened. "That relic said to grant supreme wisdom." "Exactly," Severus said. "It's said to have been stolen and hidden somewhere in the forests of Albania." 174. Strange things, since Andrews knew the legend of Ravenclaw's diadem, it would make Severus's later explanations much easier. "The ghost we're after definitely knows where that diadem is," Severus said. "That's why we want to find him in this forest and get the information from him." Severus's request was reasonable and logical. He hadn't lied, only told a partial truth. Even if given Veritaserum and asked whether what he'd said was true, he would have to nod. After listening, Andrews frowned as he thought back. "I've been traveling in Albania for a long time and have walked nearly all the big forests in this country. As for ghosts, I've seen a few, but they're either banshees fixated on their own haunts or local Albanian wizard ghosts. I've never come across any spirit claiming to be from Britain or acting strangely like that." Severus knew well that Lord Voldemort could not appear as a regular ghost. Given his current condition, it was doubtful he could even mimic an ethereal human form. In Severus's memory of the original story, Voldemort at this time could survive only by possessing small animals. He could not exist independently. "From what I understand, that ghost is very unusual," Severus explained. "He doesn't usually appear as a simple spirit. He attaches himself to living creatures." "Attaches to living creatures?" Andrews frowned. "Ordinary ghosts can't do that. Is he some special kind of spirit?" "Yes." Severus kept his voice level. "You went to Hogwarts. You know Peeves. After he died, he kept existing in a way similar to that. This spirit is like that." Andrews rubbed his chin. His thick beard looked long neglected. "If that's true, trying to find him in a forest is like looking for a needle in a haystack. He can attach himself to any animal. How are we supposed to tell which one he's hiding in?" Severus had anticipated the question. "First, we can rule out magical creatures. Given his temperament, he wouldn't hide in animals associated with magical beings. Those creatures are watched by the Albanian Ministry of Magic, and he would fear being found by wizards." "You know him well?" Andrews looked at Severus, puzzled. "There's a ghost at Hogwarts who was close to him in life. I learned a lot from the ghosts of Hogwarts," Severus replied calmly. Andrews took the remark as a casual answer and didn't read too much into it. Still, He didn't think Severus had a great chance of finding the spirit. Even if we exclude magical creatures, there are countless ordinary animals here. This will still be very difficult, smiled slightly. I know it's hard, but isn't that what makes it an adventure? It's because the path is full of unknowns that the rewards feel greater when you succeed. Andrews brightened. You're right. Because the road ahead is uncertain, someone has to be the first to step forward, the spirit of adventure. My work here is also nearing its final stages, Severus added. I can spare some time each day to help. Once Andrews agreed, Severus pressed on. You've traveled these Albanian forests for years. Have you noticed any strange ordinary animals, especially in places where no magical creatures live? Andrews suddenly looked energized. If you're asking about odd things I've seen, there's plenty to tell. Severus prompted him gently, preferably something connected to animals or spirits. Of course, for example, in the forest the Muggles call Logara National Park, there are some very strange animals. Have you ever seen an eagle fight a dragon? Andrew's single sentence, delivered with a storyteller's flair, captured everyone's attention. Lupin, Harry, and Draco all leaning in. A dragon? Draco exclaimed. Harry, skeptical, only shook his head. Yes, Andrews said. I wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't seen it myself. Just across this valley, southeast about 3 or 4 days' travel, there's the Fire Dragon Nature Reserve, set up by the Albanian and Greek Ministries of Magic. About a dozen dragons live there. One day, about a year ago, soon after I began researching the Lulu tribe and their kin, I went toward that reserve to collect some Isla grass. That grass grows well where dragon dung enriches the soil. I was with a troll I call Anderson, one of the smarter ones in his tribe. He likes to come along when I go out to keep me safe. As I searched for Isla grass, I suddenly heard a tremendous roar. It terrified Anderson. I'd never seen him so scared. Anderson is a troll, Andrews said, glancing at Harry and Draco. The two boys, not yet at Hogwarts, instinctively shook their heads. You should know what class of magical creature a troll is, Andrews barked. XXX class, he added loudly. They aren't as powerful as giants, but usually they're the masters of the land. Yet at that moment, Anderson was trembling like a little mouse. I looked up toward where the roar had come from, and the sky was blocked by what looked like a small mountain. Andrews's eyes widened as he told the tale. Guess what kind of dragon that was? Harry and Draco were enthralled, shivering as the image took shape in their minds. It was a Ukrainian ironbelly, the largest dragon in the world. It can weigh over 6 tons. Flying through the air, it's like a floating mountain. 175, mutual help. Although that dragon is the largest specimen, it's sluggish. Even so, it's still a dragon, Andrews said. Most ordinary creatures wouldn't dare get close, and yet I saw an eagle using its agility and small size to attack it. Harry's eyes widened. What kind of eagle? Andrews described it, back brown-black, wings with black and white stripes. Next to a Ukrainian ironbelly, it looked smaller than the dragon's eye. Severus flipped through the field guide he had bought in Britain until they found an exact match. That's a goshawk, a small to medium bird of prey. Exactly, Andrews confirmed when he saw the picture. It was unbelievably fierce, almost frenzied, kept tangling with the dragon, and then they flew off together. I tried to follow, but lost them. I only managed to pick up a few feathers. He pointed to a third shelf on a cluttered wooden bookcase. A single feather, framed and tucked away among odds and ends. This is one of them. I brought it back as a keepsake. While Andrews spoke, Severus had already produced parchment and was making notes. Anything else? He asked. Of course, Andrews grinned. If I started, I could go on for days. Besides unusual animals, there are spirits. Andrews reached into the jumble on his shelves, if shelves could be called that, and pulled out a dusty photo album. He rubbed his hands and set it before Severus, flipping through the pages. The photographs were all his own, fantastic beasts, rare magical plants, and a surprising number of trolls. Most of the troll pictures showed the same individual, Lulu, but against wildly different backdrops. Severus and Lupin exchanged a glance. Andrews and Lulu hadn't first met in this valley's troll band. They'd met long before and had been traveling together ever since. Harry and Draco leaned closer to the album until Andrews found the photograph he wanted. Aha! Here, he said, pointing. The photo, showed Lulu snarling and baring his teeth beside a spirit made vivid by developing potion, a hunchbacked old witch in a black cloak, her face pocked with warts. Beside her, Lulu looked as if he'd been teased a moment before and was ready to take revenge. When we first came into this forest, Lulu and I were looking for the local troll tribe. We followed the river and checked every tributary. Trolls always camp near clean water. At the river's far end, we found this banshee. Severus examined the picture. Photographing a spirit without blurring requires perfect conditions. Andrews had managed it. This was a forest banshee, not some other kind of ghost. Lupin frowned. "What's special about this banshee's spirit?" he asked. "She said she'd never been here before," Andrews answered, eyes bright. Severus and Lupin both sat up straighter. Hard to believe, right? Anyone who knows spirits knows they're usually bound to the place they died. They can't visit places they never walked in life. He lifted the photo for them to see. But that day she told us a dark wizard had cursed her into a teacup. A century ago, a French alchemist found the cup during his travels and freed her. Since then, she's wandered. A restless urge kept drawing her into forests. She's been through almost every woodland in Europe and finally settled in Albania because when she arrived, she sensed a strange black mist she recognized, like the curse the dark wizard used to trap her. She told me she wants to find the source of that black mist. Severus's expression grew thoughtful. If the banshee had once been trapped in a teacup and had been freed, that suggested the cup broke the usual limits on spirits. Nicholas Flamel's name came to mind. If the same teacup principle applied to the ghost that occupied Snape's form, a freed teacup ghost would no longer be bound to sharing a body. The possibility that the teacup could really release a ghost from its old restrictions made Severus sit up straighter. Andrew's mention of a black mist linked to a dark wizard was even more interesting. Andrews went on, telling them about rune spores far out of place for this forest, poacher gangs who'd been dragged off by biting cabbages and arrested by Albanian aurors, and dragon eggs that had gone missing from the Fire Dragon Nature Reserve. The stories fascinated Harry and the others. The boys listened, rapt, though none of the tales offered an immediate clue. At the end, Severus asked directly, "Can you tell us where the banshee is now?" Andrews scratched his head, surprised by the sudden focus on that one tale, but he'd promised to help and didn't refuse. He rose and rummaged through a pile of parchment, unveiling a crudely drawn map. Simple sketches marked the reserve's mountains and rivers. Crude but serviceable, the map showed an old stretch of river circled in ink. "She's usually active along this part," Andrews said. "I haven't seen her in some time, but wizards in Albania say she still haunts the area and rarely moves on." Severus studied the map and matched it to their current position. "So we follow this stream to the river, go north along it, and just before the reserve's edge, we'll reach her territory, correct?" Andrews's face fell. That would have been true, but 2 years ago a summer storm changed things. Days of heavy rain turned a tributary into the main channel and shifted the river's course. "This map is from when I first came to find the troll band. It's outdated. If you follow it now, you'll miss her. Because the terrain changed, Apparition can't lock onto the exact spot either. Finding her will be tricky." He hesitated, then looked up. "If you're determined, I can lead you to the river's original main channel. Follow it, and you'll find her for certain." Severus looked surprised, but didn't assume the man owed them anything. "What would you want in return?" Andrews didn't hesitate. It was a straightforward offer of mutual aid. "Lulu and I will be leaving Europe in a year. Before we go, we want to repair the Troll clan's homes in Oliveira Valley. As you saw, their shelters barely keep out a breeze, let alone count as houses. While you search for the banshee, could you spare us time to help rebuild?" Harry was the first to answer, hardly able to contain his eagerness. "Of course." Draco hesitated. His upbringing had taught him to sneer at Muggleborns, and helping trolls felt beneath him. But Lupin had no objection, and Severus, who bore trolls no prejudice, found the work hardly disagreeable. "It's agreed, then," Severus decided. Andrews beamed and stood. "Tomorrow, I'll apparate you to the old tributary. Tonight, we celebrate your arrival with a feast." They accepted gladly. The valley where the troll settlement lay was vast. The camp itself occupied less than a 20th of the land around the lake. East of the camp, to everyone's surprise, a fenced flock of goats grazed. Perhaps 100 in number, they were not ordinary goats but yellow-horned goats, large, crossbred with magical stock. Each animal was as big as a cow. Fed on fodder mixed with specific potions, they grew to maturity in 3 months. Their meat was tough and tasteless to wizards, so no tavern served it, but dragons, giants, and trolls prized that very toughness because their jaws were far stronger than a wizard's. The trolls themselves did not herd well. They tended to eat whatever was nearby and move on when game grew scarce. These goats were Andrews's solution. He and Lulu had taught the clan to settle and graze in the valley, so now the trolls always had food. Severus's group would have to provide for themselves. Andrews handed Harry and Draco fishing rods, suggesting the lake teemed with colorball fish if they preferred that challenge. Lupin slipped into the sparse lakeside woods after glimpsing pheasants on the way in. Severus stayed behind to help Andrews mix the medicated fodder and to consult with Ghost Snape about the teacup. "It's all but certain," Ghost Snape said. "That cup can free a spirit from the fetters of its former life. So any thoughts?" 176 Coercion. Severus's words sent Ghost Snape into a brief silence. A long moment passed before the ghost spoke coldly from within Severus's body. "You want to push me away now? You claim we're one and the same, yet you already want to take everything that's mine." Severus ignored the accusation. He shrugged and bottled the potion from the cauldron into a small vial. Without stopping his hands, he answered in Ghost Snape's mind. "You always expect me to be as sinister as you imagine. You've seen what I've done with your own eyes. Do you still doubt the promises I made to you? I'm finding a way to free you from this body because I want you released. You died. The fact that I'm occupying your corpse is a settled reality, isn't it? And in the entire history of magic, there has never been a case of a ghost being resurrected, nor of a soul moving on completely. Even if I didn't mind us staying like this, 2 souls in one body, what about you? Once Harry is truly safe and your former master utterly destroyed, the obsession that keeps your soul here will vanish. Do you really want to remain in this body forever?" Ghost Snape's expression remained cold as he listened, his hollow eyes fixed on Severus. "Then wait until you've fulfilled everything you promised before you bring this up again." Severus expected no less. Ghost Snape had always needed to see things through with his own eyes before he could be persuaded. Whether or not he trusted Severus, whether he believed Severus could protect Harry or eliminate every threat, he insisted on witnessing the end himself. For now, one promise would have to do. "Are you promising me now that once everything is settled, you'll leave this body?" Ghost Snape sneered. "You still act like you're impatient, fixated on cutting ties with me. If you truly can't wait, the teacup is in your hand. I have no power to stop you. Do what you will." Severus's tone was calm. "Precisely because I respect your thoughts and believe we are the same, I asked for your opinion. But you can't keep using the fact that I'm sincere and reasonable to coerce me." He blinked. "Once the troubles are dealt with, our lives won't be over. The road ahead is long, and I have to think ahead." When Severus fell silent, Ghost Snape said no more. He stopped arguing. He knew these words were no longer open to negotiation. Silence left him uncertain. Severus had his plans, his future, but what of him, a ghost left to wander? Paris, France. Yuma, who had been at the ministry for 3 days without returning home, finally had a chance to rest that afternoon. In the Auror Head's office, Gerard rubbed her temples, finished reading the report he'd personally submitted, and said tiredly, "The search mission ends here for now. Take a day off. Go home to your wife and child." "I'll hand the follow-up to Stuart and the others," Yuma replied. This group of Death Eaters who kidnapped the Lemme couple have either already gotten what they wanted and fled or have gone into hiding. Any further steps will require cooperation with the British side. Gerard nodded. "You should get some rest. Apart from Mother Amy, no one else was harmed. At least we can give the public something to hold on to." Her brow remained furrowed. "Any news from Snape's side?" Since Severus's quiet departure from France, public opinion in the French magical community had been in turmoil. With Nicolas Flamel keeping his doors closed and his wife refusing interviews, hungry reporters had nothing to dig up. They turned their attention to the ministry. Commentators on the Wizarding Wireless Network speculated that the reason Severus vanished after rescuing the Flamel couple was that the French Aurors couldn't bear a British wizard stealing the spotlight, so they had pushed the hero aside. They suggested that Severus had left with the two boys who had guarded the ministry and Remus Lupin. The theory caught on. Howlers arrived daily, denouncing the Aurors' incompetence and hammering the ministry's reputation. Gerard wanted Severus to make a public statement to clear the Auror's name, and the person most likely to know Severus's whereabouts was Yuma. Faced with her question, Yuma only shook his head. "This is the fourth time you've asked me. Other than Mr. Snape saying goodbye to me before leaving, I don't know where they went." Gerard sighed and waved him away. "Go home and rest." Yuma left the head's office and instead of returning home immediately, went to the shopping street in the Wizarding Quarter. He bought the toy broom his son had wanted and the Super Witch household cleaning set his wife had been reluctant to buy. Then, he apparated back to the Muggle village on the outskirts of Paris, where his family home sat, one of the largest parts of the property he'd inherited from his grandfather. He hid the gifts behind his back and pushed open the courtyard gate. The flower beds had been trimmed. Clippings lay waiting to be cleared. A smile touched his face. He pictured his son interrupting his wife while she was pruning and being sent indoors for a lesson. "Sarah?" he called as he opened the front door, but the house answered with dead silence. The living room looked unchanged from when he left 3 days ago. Sarah's slippers and his son's shoes sat neatly on the shoe rack. The portrait of old Yuma, the man who had died 2 years earlier, hung on the wall, dozing as usual. A plate of washed grapes still gleamed with water on the coffee table. "Sarah!" Yuma called again, setting the gifts down and slipping his wand from his sleeve. There was no reply. The portrait stirred. "What's all the shouting about?" The old man in the portrait grumbled. Years as an Auror had sharpened Yuma's instincts. He tightened his grip on his wand and scanned the house. "Where are they?" The portrait yawned. "They entertained a friend of yours at noon. You home-shunning idiot. Why did I ever agree to let you become an Auror? No one looked after me at St. Mungo's, and now my daughter-in-law and grandson are left alone." Yuma's jaw tensed. "I don't usually have visitors, even colleagues. Who would come to my home like this? Did you see who it was? Where did Sarah and the child go?" The portrait flapped into nervousness. "Heavens, I was half asleep. I only saw Sarah welcome a man in a gray robe. He spoke English. I didn't see where they went after that." Yuma's attention had already snapped to the staircase. He'd heard a faint movement. "Don't pretend to be my friend. Stop hiding. You didn't kidnap Sarah and the child just to bait me, did you?" A figure stopped, concealing his steps, and descended. Terrifyingly familiar, the tall, thin man in the gray robe revealed himself. Yuma's pupils contracted. That messy, elegant black hair. Those fierce, gray eyes. Even in tatters, his handsomeness was undeniable. "Sirius Black!" Yuma ground out the name, his gaze fixed on the escaped prisoner of Azkaban. Black twirled a small wooden stick in his fingers, the wand of Yuma's wife, a trophy he'd taken that day. "Don't glare like that," he said irritably. "I haven't harmed your wife or child. All I need is for you to answer me truthfully." The portrait of old Yuma began to scream and curse, having recognized the man. Yuma, however, forced himself still. "You kidnapped the LeMay couple and stole files from the ministry. You still haven't succeeded." Black's patience snapped. He bristled. He refused to take all crimes as his, but he had reasons for terrorizing Yuma. "None of that concerns me. I want one thing. Where is Snape?" 3 days had passed since Black arrived in Paris. He'd read the papers, broken into homes of ministry staff, and pieced together a single fact. Severus and Lupin had disappeared with Harry and the others. The media were searching, but the ministry had no answers. Black felt mocked by Severus, led by the nose. Having learned that Yuma was the French Auror closest to Severus, he had risked the operation to force information out of him. As Black had promised, he would not harm women and children. He wasn't the reckless boy he used to be. But terrorizing an Auror might work. "You want revenge on Snape," Yuma said, watching him. "Just because he claimed he'd reformed in Britain, ruined the Death Eater's plans, and rescued the LeMay couple in Paris." "That's a disguise," Yuma continued. He's deceived everyone. He played you all. He's still working for his master. It's all an act with his friends to put on a show." Yuma's words struck Black like a provocation. He roared and raised the wand. "Don't give me this nonsense. Just tell me where he is." Yuma drew a steady breath. His dark eyes shone. "I don't know." "You're lying," Black panted. "Many people saw him. When he left the ministry, he only said goodbye to you. Tell me the truth. Tell me." "I said, I don't know." Yuma met him coldly. "If you want to see whether I'm lying, view my memories. They'll show you." Black's gaze was pulled as if by a thread. His bloodshot eyes bored into Yuma. The hand that held his wand trembled, the tip already leveled at the French auror. For a long, silent moment, he stayed frozen like that, and in the end did not force legilimency on Yuma, who met the stare without flinching. No one knew what kept Black from it. Perhaps he hadn't used the spell in years. Perhaps the unfamiliar wand felt wrong in his hand. Or maybe reason finally overrode rage, and he pictured the cost of rifling through a senior auror's memories. "What did he say to you before he left?" he asked instead. Black stared at him, cold and shut off. Fury simmered behind his eyes, but every bubble was corked and shoved down. Yuma read the reaction plainly. He couldn't guess why Black hesitated. He only answered truthfully. Where Severus had gone after leaving France, he did not know, and neither did anyone else. The ministry had checked every flu record in France and found nothing. Severus must have anticipated this and covered his tracks. While he thought, Yuma kept speaking. "He didn't say much, only thanked me for looking after him in Paris these last days." Black drew a long, controlled breath. He neither confirmed nor contradicted, only looked at Yuma for a long moment, snapped his wand sharply, and vanished with a pop. Once Black was gone, Yuma's calm mask slipped. He moved quickly up the stairs, flung open bedroom doors, and finally found his wife and son in the study, apparently asleep. A quick examination showed they'd been stunned with stupefy and were otherwise unharmed. Only then did he let himself breathe. The study had been ransacked, books and letters scattered everywhere. Yuma rushed downstairs, threw a pinch of flu powder into the grate, and within minutes, green flames shaped Gerard's upper body. "Sirius Black is in Paris," he blurted as soon as the connection took. Gerard, who had been in a meeting, looked startled. "Who did you say?" "Sirius Black," Yuma repeated. Only Gerard's face was visible in the flames, but others were clearly behind her. Gasps went up around her. She hushed them with a sharp bark and turned back to Yuma. "How did he get away? Did Snape contact you?" Yuma's first thought had been that Severus had sent word, but that wasn't it. "No. Black broke into my home, took my wife and son hostage, tried to force me to tell him where Severus had gone. When I couldn't, he fled. He took my wife's wand and disapparated. You'd better come at once." Before Yuma had finished, the green fire flared wider. Sparks popped, and Gerard herself stepped fully into the room, having apparated straight from the ministry. A contingent of French aurors followed, wands at the ready. Gerard's robes were smeared with soot, but she barely noticed. She strode from the fireplace and demanded, "How did he escape?" "Apparition," Yuma said. "He grabbed my wife's wand and disapparated." "Stewart," Gerard called. A tall, long-haired auror stepped forward and led his team off at once to trace the apparition's origin. With full ministry authority, they had a lead in seconds and were gone. Gerard stayed behind, her face grave. "Tell me everything." Yuma, as a veteran auror, gave a clear, concise account. In under 2 minutes, he had laid out the whole incident. When Gerard learned Black had risked so much just to learn Severus's whereabouts, her expression hardened. "They haven't fled France, and they're not lying low. They mean to get revenge on Snape." Black had made himself hard to spot for a reason. As an unregistered, illegal animagus, his transformation wasn't in ministry records. Even if an auror saw him, they wouldn't know it was him. That was exactly what had happened. Curled beside a trash bin in a narrow street, Black watched the auror's apparat into the alley, questioned passersby, and never once glanced in his direction. After assessing their search, he rose, stretched like a dog just waking from a nap, and slipped out of the cordon. He had risked everything that day and found nothing. He'd ransacked Yuma's correspondence and come up with nothing, not even in the diary, which contained only laughable gratitude and rueful entries about being duped by that fraud. On the stairs, face to face with Yuma, while his family was held, he'd seen no lie. Severus must have vanished deliberately. No Severus, no Harry, no way to know where to keep Harry safe. Black could not fathom what Severus was planning, but he was certain Snape had no good intentions for Harry. He'd hidden the wand he'd swiped from Yuma's wife beneath a paving stone in a back alley, then, transformed into a shaggy black dog, prodded the shadows of Paris, hesitating. There was one other lead. Nicholas Flamel. In the papers, Flamel had spoken warmly of the man who'd rescued him, Severus. Rumor had it Severus had even taken Harry to Lemai's house for lunch before vanishing. If anyone might know where Severus had gone, it would be Flamel, not Yuma. But the Flamel house was swarmed. The alchemist had only just been freed from kidnapping, and the crowd was thick with journalists and aurors. Black, officially an escaped Death Eater and presumed murderous, would never risk approaching Flamel with the aurors around. He might act on impulse, but he wasn't stupid. Besides, after what he had done at Yuma's, the aurors would have tightened the cordon around Flamel's house. Sirius felt more lost than ever. He wandered Paris without real direction, knowing what he must do, yet not how to begin. Time slipped away. Dusk feathered the rooftops and settled on his black fur. Head low, ears flat, he padded into the nearest metro station as a thin rain began to fall, avoiding the platform guard. The station was a refuge for the homeless. The sign read Stalingrad in blocky letters, and the guard was asleep on a cot, his face buried in a magazine. Black took a place on the fringe of a cardboard camp beneath hostile stares from local mongrels. Outside, the rain came down. Inside, commuters hurried by, moving at a different, easier pace that left them smiling. Curled on the cold tiles, legs crossed, Sirius watched. Worry for Harry, hatred for Severus, bewilderment at Remus. Everything churned inside him, bitter as a pint of Gamp's old vintage. In the end, the strongest thing was regret. He cursed himself for ever thinking Azkaban was fit punishment instead of staying with Harry. He cursed himself for believing killing Peter had been enough atonement. How many more mistakes would he make? How many people would he let down? He whined like any dog. Night deepened. The camp grew louder. Drunks and addicts congregated under the station lights. "Hey, big fellow, fancy a taste?" a sodden tramp asked, flopping down beside him with a plastic sack of beer, cheeks ruddy with drink. Sirius meant to ignore him, but a can was tipped between his jaws. "Come on, drink with me. Tonight's a grand night. Every night's worth celebrating." Cold beer slid down Black's throat, a small mercy he hadn't known he missed. He drank it down instead of baring his teeth. The tramp crowed and cracked another can, hugging the shaggy head. "You like it?" He set another empty on the pile and kept the cans coming until his coins ran out, then pilfered a few more. The warmth dulled the edge of Sirius's misery until his eyes began to swim. Just as he was slipping toward oblivion, he fixed on a figure at the edge of the platform. An ancient man in ash-gray robes, hair like silver wire, moving with an air of deliberate calm. 178, walking with trolls. Since returning home, the Flamel's life had been remarkably quiet. The couple had always kept to themselves in most matters of the French wizarding world. Their possession of the Philosopher's Stone afforded them a great deal of protection. After giving their statements at the ministry, Minister Rousseau came by Nicholas's house twice to feel him out. Once he was certain Nicholas held no grudge against him or the current ministry over the incident, he relaxed and stopped bothering them. As for the reporters camped outside their door all day, Nicholas had plenty of experience dealing with that sort of thing. The main entrance they were blocking was only one of the public exits of Flamel Cottage. As a place that had once served as a safe house for Dumbledore's followers, the cottage naturally had other exits. For the 2 days after his conversation with Severus, Nicholas had no intention of going out. He first wrote to Dumbledore to let him know he was safe and, in passing, explained the true circumstances of the recent events. French politicians might be fooled, but Dumbledore, far away in Britain, would not be. Neither Grindelwald nor Nicholas had ever thought they could keep this from him, so Nicholas did not consider the letter a breach of any agreement. Within half a day, Dumbledore replied. He said little about Nurmengard, but he showed a keen curiosity about Severus Snape. To Nicholas's surprise, Dumbledore did not know where Severus planned to go next or what he intended to do. Severus's visit had been presented as part of arrangements from Dumbledore, Learning that Dumbledore himself was unaware astonished Nicholas. Nicholas decided not to tell Dumbledore about the conversations he and Severus had shared at the cottage. For one thing, Nicholas himself was not certain where Severus was headed or what he would do next. He could only make vague guesses. Since Severus had not been forthcoming about his purpose and had not informed Dumbledore, Nicholas chose to keep his confidences for the time being. In his reply to Dumbledore, he described his observations and his assessment of Severus's character, noted that he had handed the signature book over to Severus to try his hand, and ended with a simple admission: he did not know where Severus had gone afterward. The day after finishing his correspondence, Nicholas grew restless of being shut in. He and his wife ran many charities benefiting muggles as well as magical folk. The jackal-like reporters had kept them distracted from the wizarding world, but they had fewer concerns on the muggle side. So, disguised, the Flamels began to appear at Paris welfare hospitals and orphanages. One evening, while Mrs. Flamel went home to rest, Nicholas put on a disillusionment charm and walked among the muggle crowds. He liked to think and observe that way. The joys, angers, sorrows, and small, private triumphs displayed by the people around him were a constant source of attention. Sometimes he would quietly help a job seeker retrieve a lost resume, allowing them a surprise within their frustration. Sometimes he would arrange for a pickpocket to stumble, feel guilt, and walk into a police station with the day's haul in hand. At other times, he would discreetly trip a mugger and send him sprawling into the gutter. Mostly, though, there was little he could change. Nicholas understood plainly that, however long he lived, he could not fix everything in the world. Many say that a long life blunts a person's capacity for regret. Immortals learn to accept what cannot be altered. Not Nicholas. No matter how many years he had seen, his compassion never dulled. That was partly why he had become close friends with Dumbledore despite their age difference, and why he and his wife always found ways to be useful. As night deepened, Nicholas found a quiet place and looked up at the star-splattered sky. 200 years earlier, he had followed a centaur to learn astrology. It was not a reliable art. Divination is usually a born talent, but over his long life he had stumbled on truths now and again. Tonight he felt a nudge from the heavens, a sense that something odd in the stars warranted his attention. Drawn by that feeling, he wandered until he arrived at a Paris subway station named for a famous battle. There he noticed an intriguing animal, a large dog with pitch-black fur. From the moment it lay there listless, Nicholas watched it. In its eyes he discerned expressions that seemed almost human: worry, anger, confusion, regret. The dog ignored other strays and looked at them with a kind of disdain, as if considering them beneath notice. When a homeless man caused it annoyance, the dog's gaze turned to pure loathing. Those emotions, even if negative, were reserved for its own kind. A drunk nicknamed Old Hunter came upon the animal and began sharing his beer. At first the dog resisted, eyes glazed with shock. The resistance melted away quickly. The animal took to the alcohol as quickly as any human seeking a numbness from reality. Soon it leaned into the drunk, wrapping a foreleg over his shoulder and drinking alongside him, no longer like a dog at all, but eerily human in its gestures. If the man beside them had been sober, he would have noticed how unnatural it was. A massive black dog taking a human's pose, arms slung around a man's shoulder while drinking from a can. Nicholas watched, thoughtful. After a long moment, he dispelled his disillusionment charm. The sudden appearance of an elderly man in a subway station where the city's lost souls gathered drew no attention, but the dog noticed. Despite the beer cans piled around like a small mountain and Old Hunter's passed-out form, the animal's vigilance snapped back as it stared at Nicholas. Nicholas did not look away. He walked slowly toward it and crouched. The man and the dog regarded each other for a long time. Then Nicholas smiled and spoke softly. "If you're homeless, why don't you come with me?" The dog's glazed eyes hesitated for more than 10 seconds. Then, shaking, it rose and followed him. The two of them left the station together. From a distance, Nicholas could be heard scolding his new companion in a gentle voice. "Hey, don't pee on the stone path. Go to the tree." Meanwhile, in the forests of Albania, inside the Troll tribe's valley, the evening had come. After an afternoon of preparation, Severus and the others finally sat down to a feast. Troll celebrations were boisterous. Each of them clutched a huge club and danced around the roasted yellow-horned goat, turning the valley into what felt like the epicenter of an earthquake. Birds and small animals fled at the noise. They ate and slept wherever they fell. After a troll finished its goat by the bonfire, it often simply collapsed where it sat, blissfully unconcerned that it was not in one of its crude wooden shelters. The wizard's meal began alongside the troll's festivities, but Harry had barely taken a second sip of juice before the trolls were done. Their early finish gave the wizards a friendlier, more relaxed atmosphere for their own dinner. They sat at a wooden table by the lake, which was crowded with food. Fish soup, made from the plimpy. Harry and Draco had caught that afternoon. Rabbits and pheasants Lupin had taken in the woods, and cabbages and carrots Severus had foraged nearby. Andrews entertained them with tales of his travels across Europe. "The first time I met Lulu was in Norway," he said. "Back then I hadn't even begun my troll research in earnest. Don't be fooled by how obedient these big fellows can be under Lulu and me. A tiger trained in a circus is still a wild beast at heart. Trolls are similar. That's why most wizards don't consider them beings. In most cases, they're like wild animals, acting on instinct rather than thought. Only a tiny fraction are exceptions, and Lulu is an exception among exceptions." Andrew's eyes lit up. His affection for his troll companion was obvious. "Want to hear how we first met? I was at a wild lake near Skjok in Norway, trying to find a merperson tribe. My information was wrong. There were no merpeople at all, but there was a kelpie. I was terrified. My wand was on the shore, and I had nothing to deal with it. Just when I thought I was done for, Lulu appeared, on the shore, holding a little fir tree and roaring at me. It used that tree to hook my clothes and drag me out of the lake. Imagine my shock. Saved by a troll. It didn't eat me. It saved me. The first thing I did after that was try to communicate in troll speech. It understood me. It could think. It had a kind heart." At Andrew's words, Severus and the others turned to look at Lulu. The troll was now hauling its companion's enormous feet, trying to get them back into the wooden sheds for sleep. "And it told me it had saved many people," Andrews continued. "But wizards always see trolls as monsters, and those it saved would flee crying, too ashamed or afraid to accept help. Lulu felt lonely. Its kin couldn't understand it, and wizards wouldn't accept it. It wandered until it came to that lake. Many wizards would show up chasing rumors about the ancient merperson tribe and nearly get killed by the kelpie. Lulu stayed there to rescue them." Severus raised an eyebrow. "So that lake was a trap?" "Exactly," Andrews nodded. "From Lulu's hints, we realized it looked like a setup. We investigated the lake and the merperson rumors together and found the culprit. A dark wizard had been illegally breeding a kelpie and spreading false stories of merpeople to lure adventurers as food for his pet. Once we exposed him, Lulu and I carried on together." Lupin asked, smiling, "And then you two traveled together?" With an earnest grin, Andrews replied, "I had no reason not to invite it. It saved me. We even helped the Norwegian Aurors solve the case. It had nowhere else to go, so we kept each other company. After meeting Lulu, I committed to studying trolls seriously. We traveled through many countries in Europe, visited multiple tribes, and observed their lives, habits, and migrations. We're the best of partners." Severus watched Andrew's heartfelt expression and couldn't help but think of some of Gilderoy Lockhart's books from memory, titles about adventures with dangerous creatures, Break with a Banshee, Gadding with Ghouls, Holidays with Hags, and amusingly, Travels with Trolls. 179. Draco's Great Fishing Discovery. The next morning, Severus and Lupin had Harry and Draco up at the crack of dawn. Building houses for trolls was such a novel task that both boys felt a thrill of excitement. When they stepped out of the wooden cabin in their work clothes, Andrews was already there with Lulu, driving the trolls to get a head start on the preparations. The 32 trolls had been split into 8 teams of 4. 4 teams were sent into the nearby woods to fell trees, cutting down the ones Andrews had selected as the right size and stacking them in piles. The other 4 teams each carried a huge saw suited to their bulk, trimming the branches and stripping bark from the felled trunks and stacking the clean timber neatly. Lulu's role was even more important. As Andrews had warned, The trolls were so dim they operated almost on instinct. Even simple tasks were beyond many of them, and Lulu had to correct their mistakes. Some trolls would simply drop their logs mid-task and try to quit on the spot. When persuasion failed, Lulu used its position as leader to force them back to work. Only with such constant supervision did the creatures manage the most basic chores. The assignments given to Severus and the others were lighter, but no less tedious. Severus was to brew a special varnish to treat the timber once the trolls finished prepping it. Lupin was to dispose of the branches and bark, crushing them with a heavy mallet and flinging the chaff beyond the valley. Harry, following Andrews's blueprint and wielding a tape measure, had to mark the exact spot for each new troll dwelling. Draco was to trail Harry, and once a site was fixed, scratch the house's perimeter on the ground with a stick. They wolfed down a quick breakfast and set to work. For Severus, who could brew the most convoluted potions without effort, making varnish was overkill. With a duplication charm, he copied his own cauldron into 5 huge vats. He had Lupin send over a heap of shredded wood, lit fires beneath all 5, and began brewing according to Andrew's recipe. Lupin's task was equally straightforward, messy but not difficult. Harry and Draco, however, ran into trouble, entirely predictably. "You drew it wrong," Draco snapped. "I did not. I measured everything exactly from Mr. Andrews's plan." "Then why are the houses squashed together? It makes no sense." "Must be your mistake." Harry eyed him suspiciously. Draco tossed his head in disdain. "Me, make a mistake? While you were still playing in the mud, I was ruling straight lines on parchment with a quill." Harry wasn't going to treat Draco like an elder student obliged to humor him. He folded his arms and sneered. "Oh, really? Then, oh great line drawer, is that supposed to be your masterpiece?" He gestured at the crooked, worm-like scratches Draco had gouged in the dirt, ugly beside Harry's neat markers. "Don't tell me you still scribble the same sloppy way you did as a toddler?" Draco's face flamed. He never won their verbal spars. He hurled his stick aside and lunged like a starving tiger. Harry was ready. No wand needed. He simply raised a fist, aiming for Draco's left cheek the moment he came within reach. Before they could grapple, 2 hands seized their collars and yanked them apart. "Let go, Snape. I'll smash his face in," Draco spat. "Bring it on, Professor. I'll show the runt what he's asking for." Harry shot back. "Slimy loud mouth. Whiny mummy's boy." Severus didn't bother scolding. He signaled to Lupin, who had jogged over to take the boy's plans. Lupin glanced at the parchments and spotted the problem at once. The units don't match. Andrews used different scales for the position marks and the perimeter. Severus looked as though he'd expected nothing else. "You two only needed to lay your sheets side by side to see it." Harry gave Draco a contemptuous glare. The puffskein bouncing on his shoulder seemed to echo the insult. "The git hasn't the brains Merlin gave a turnip." Draco shook a fist in Harry's direction. "At least I'm not a scrawny little troll stuffed with slugs." Andrews hurried up, apologizing profusely when he saw the mismatched plans. "My fault entirely. Silly mistake." Even with the mix-up cleared, Harry and Draco obviously couldn't work together. The instant Severus released them, they'd be at each other's throats. "You caught all the color carp yesterday, didn't you, Draco?" The blonde's nostrils flared with pride. "Naturally. Who else could manage it? The runt?" He had seized on Harry's undersized frame, a relic of the Dursleys' neglect, and turned it into a nickname. "Then lunch is in your hands." Severus ruffled his hair, earning a squawk of protest. "Bring back some other fish as well. There's a rod in Andrews's hut. I saw it last night. Dig a few worms for bait." Draco wriggled free, muttering that a pure-blood Malfoy most certainly did not dig worms. Half of him, honest as ever, headed back into the hut, found Andrews's rod and landing net. As he walked toward the lake and past Harry, he shot him a deliberate, provoking glare. Whether Harry simply couldn't be bothered or was too absorbed in the 2 corrected blueprints in his hands, Draco's ferocious stare met only thin air. Snubbed, Draco strolled to the lakeside, picked a good spot, and began digging for worms with a trowel to bait his hook. Their separate tasks moved ahead in steady order. Around 11 o'clock, Severus had finished varnishing the 5 vats. Andrews, free at last, took him by the arm and apparated out of the valley toward wherever the Banshee ghost might be found. By then, Draco was already doing rather well. Whether the game gave beginners a lucky break or he was simply born to fish, barely 2 hours had passed, and his pail held 3 good catches. Along the way, he'd also netted plenty of colorball fish. When Severus prepared to leave with Andrews, Draco feigned indifference, yet his eyes were glued to the path, willing the two men to stroll past, notice his haul, praise it loudly, so he could seize the chance to run Harry down. It didn't happen. Severus and Andrews simply apparated away, never coming near the lake. Humph, Draco sniffed, unsure whom he was scorning. Rod in hand, he waited another 10 minutes. Nearly 40 without a bite had begun to erode his patience. Even what he'd already caught would feed 5 at lunch, and they weren't going to eat only fish, but to Draco this had become a contest between him and Harry. He had to outshine Harry, prove himself the better. After 5 more minutes, he snapped, reeled in, picked up his pail, and went looking for a new spot. He started walking around the lake, away from the troll camp. Noisy trolls loved splashing in for baths. Any sensible fish had long since fled that shore. To land more, he had to put distance between himself and the noise. The valley was wide, the central lake vast. When he glanced back, Harry was almost out of sight, and Lupin no more than a speck. Only then did Draco stop, satisfied. To the naked eye, the water in front of him swarmed with big fish. The trolls never fished. Generations of breeding had left the lake's stock plentiful and foolish. He cast a wormed hook, and within 3 minutes, something bit. Excited, certain he'd found the perfect place, he began casting again and again, soon running short of worms. After hauling in 6 or 7, he dropped the hook once more, and instantly felt a weight unlike any before. This had to be the real lunker. Land this one, and Severus and Lupin would gape in awe. Harry would bow and beg to be his sidekick. A novice, Draco knew nothing of playing a fish. He simply yanked with brute strength. The fight was fading. Victory was seconds away. With a final grunt, he heaved, and whatever had struggled snapped free of the water. Momentum sent him plopping onto his backside in the damp grass. No pain, only elation. He couldn't wait to see the monster he'd hooked. But when his eyes focused on what dangled from the line, his grin froze. Flushed cheeks drained to terrified white. On the hook was no fish, only a skull. A human skull. Draco scrambled up, abandoned rod and pail, and sprinted toward the troll camp. He was nearly back, could already see Harry marking lines on the ground, when memory caught up. At once he slowed to a saunter, strolling past Harry with feigned calm, leaving Harry puzzled by the sweat-soaked yet oddly serene Malfoy. Only when he reached Lupin did Draco gasp, words tumbling out. "Ahead!" Lupin, shredding branches with a reductor curse, stared. "What head? A human one. Skull! I fished it from the lake. It's human." Lupin's face shifted, first blank, then thoughtful. He glanced at Lulu supervising the trolls, confirmed Andrews was gone, and set down his wand. "Quiet. Show me. No fuss," he murmured. Draco nodded nervously and led the way. Harry called after them. Lupin merely signaled him to keep working and stay put. They reached the spot. The skull still hung from the hook, unchanged. Draco hung back, while Lupin calmly lifted it free. Years of Hogwarts study and long wandering had given him an eye for such things. He already knew. The skull only looked human. Wondered 80. Dumbledore will write in the future, "This forest is huge," but Lulu and I spent 2 years mapping it out completely. In the heart of Logara National Forest Park, beside a river that ran the length of the wood, Andrews led Severus toward the fork he'd mentioned. They had apparated nearby, but the river shifted constantly, so their position wasn't exact. Andrews needed to see its current course before he could give precise directions. "It's just that in the last 2 or 3 years, I haven't been back to this spot. There wasn't much left to explore, and most of the magical creatures here are only classified as XX or XXXX. Then Andrews seemed to remember something. "I once heard a legend about this forest from a local Albanian wizard adventurer." Severus raised an eyebrow. "A legend? You've read the tales of Beetle the Bard, haven't you? Every European wizard is familiar with those stories. Which one is your favorite?" "The one about Babbity Rabbity is quite interesting. And yet most people say the tale of the 3 brothers. They fantasize about the Deathly Hallows," Andrews shrugged. "I like the warlock's hairy heart, but the legend tied to this place is the Fountain of Good Luck." Severus remembered the tale, a well-known short story about a fountain of good luck everyone wanted to find. An unlucky knight and 3 witches faced trials, and through those trials, each obtained what they truly desired. In the end, the unlucky, magicless Muggle knight bathed in the fountain's waters and fell in love with one of the witches. The 4 lived happily together. With that simple recollection, Severus could picture the story. It's a popular tale. Albus Dumbledore once talked about it at a teacher's tea. When he was a young Transfiguration professor, the Hogwarts students put on a pantomime of it for Christmas. He was in charge of the special effects. He shook his head. According to him, the performance was a total disaster. The 4 student actors couldn't reach the summit where the Fountain of Good Luck was supposed to be, no matter what they did. And why was that? Andrews asked. Not because the story itself has some special magic, Severus said. It was because the boy playing the unlucky knight and the girl playing the witch he loves were a couple. An hour before the show, he fell for the other girl playing a witch and started pursuing her instead. Andrews stared, bewildered. He was British, but his grandfather was Norwegian. His talent had awakened while he was in Northern Europe, and he'd gone to Durmstrang. He knew little of Hogwarts affairs, especially such absurdities. And then the 2 witches started fighting on stage. They were dueling. The professor in charge of magical creatures for the pantomime was Sylvanus Kettleburn. To make the giant worm from the story, he mistakenly used an engorgement charm on an ashwinder, and it exploded on stage. Andrews's face grew stranger. Did the explosion stop the duel so staff and students could put out the fire? No, the witches kept fighting and dragged Professor Beery into it. Everyone fled in a panic. I heard the hospital wing was full that day. Severus recounted the rest without noticing Andrew's increasing incredulity. After that, the headmaster at the time, Armando Dippet, banned pantomimes at Hogwarts. That ban is still in effect. Dumbledore grumbles about it being stuffy and untheatrical, but he never forgets what happened that day. Severus abruptly realized Andrews, who had been walking beside him, had stopped. He turned to the adventurer. Is something wrong? Andrews took a breath and looked at him seriously. The staff and students at Hogwarts, they don't actually have mental problems, do they? Of course not, Severus said firmly. If something like that happened at Durmstrang, the headmaster would have expelled the 2 students who dueled on stage immediately. And injured students filling the hospital wing is considered normal? Andrews sounded incredulous. No wonder my cousin Angelo is so eccentric. He was much more normal before he went to Hogwarts. Severus gave a dry cough. From a transmigrator's view, the British magical world might indeed have been warped by Hogwarts, especially after Dumbledore arrived. But as a former head of Slytherin, he had to save the school's face. He couldn't admit that. Back to the Fountain of Good Luck, he said. Anyone who knows the story knows the fountain doesn't actually grant luck. The knight who bathed in it only thought he was magically blessed. In truth, the love and happiness he found were earned by him and the witches after they passed their trials. Andrews nodded. I've doubted that legend too. Among those folk tales, the Fountain of Good Luck is the least likely to be true. But I found real rumors about it in the Albanian magical community. Many wizards grew up knowing that a spring would sometimes appear in the forests of this country. Andrews went on. If a lucky wizard found it and was baptized in it, their luck would soar for 3 years. Severus rubbed his chin. That sounds like a long-lasting Felix Felicis, but Felix Felicis doesn't last that long. Those legends drew wizard adventurers from Italy, Montenegro, Greece, North Macedonia, Bulgaria, but the hunt only lasted 70 or 80 years. By 1950, since no one actually found anything, the craze died out. Andrews paused, then added, the rumor says that when someone truly chosen and qualified arrives, a golden-furred unicorn will appear to guide them to the fountain. Severus considered it. Sounds like a tourism tale the Albanian ministry might have made up. Perhaps, Andrews said helplessly. Either way, most local wizards have forgotten it, and hardly anyone comes into these woods now looking for that dream. They had wandered slowly, chatting, and had reached the fork Andrews had described, a narrow tributary peeling northward from the main west to east stream. This is it, Andrews said, pointing. Follow this little river north. Near the edge of the nature reserve for magical creatures is where Lulu and I first found that banshee ghost. But it's been 3 years. She may not be there anymore. Severus nodded. A clue is better than nothing. Remember to come back for lunch if you find it. They parted. Andrews apparated back to the valley camp, and Severus walked north along the smaller stream. He moved quietly, searching. Ghost Snape, who had been very quiet since they confirmed the function of the Banshee's teacup, suddenly spoke up. You know everything about him far too well. Severus knew who him was. You mean Dumbledore? He never told us about that Christmas pantomime, but there really is a pantomime ban at Hogwarts. Ghost Snape's tone was dark. Since meeting Grindelwald and Nicholas, he'd sensed more and more mystery surrounding Severus. Severus had once said he knew so much because he was a natural-born seer. Grindelwald, clearly a seer himself, had said even a seer couldn't foresee something so specific. How could Severus know so much? Was he a seer? Something else? And now, I know what you're really looking for. You're looking for Vold, the Dark Lord. Severus said casually. Even as a ghost, you're unwilling to say his name? Don't change the subject, Ghost Snape snapped. You know them too well. You know things about two wizards no one should know. Yet they know nothing about you. They can't imagine someone like you exists, Severus replied. Ghost Snape's outrage had been fueled by the Hogwarts anecdote Severus had told Andrews. He might have held back, but Severus had described Dumbledore's past so vividly, as if he'd witnessed it. That made suppression impossible. Severus paused, then added earnestly, If I told you I read about that pantomime in Dumbledore's annotated edition of the Tales of Beedle the Bard, would you believe me? You liar! You told me to be honest, but you've been lying all along, even now, Ghost Snape shouted. Do you think I don't read? There is no Dumbledore annotated Beedle in the magical world. In a few years he will write it, Severus said calmly. He'll even complain in his notes on the Fountain of Good Luck that Lucius and his lot protested, demanding Hogwarts remove all books about the story from the shelves because it encourages wizard-muggle intermarriage. Those words hit home. Ghost Snape simply stared at him, eyes burning. You even know what book he'll annotate in the future and what he'll write in it. I never lied, Severus said. I told you before you could treat me as something like a seer. I never claimed to be one. They had reached the edge of the nature reserve. As long as you trust my stance, the more I know the better for both of us, Severus added. It increases the odds we achieve our goal. He drew his wand and began a careful search. Ghost Snape fell silent, but his gaze never left Severus's face. Even if Severus was right and they shared an objective, Snape couldn't stop wondering what would happen when their aim was achieved or failed. This Severus, mysterious in origin, who had somehow become part of his very soul, knew secrets about Dumbledore and Voldemort better than they knew themselves. After all the dust settled, who would he choose to be? Dumbledore or Lord Voldemort?